Vivian Hale never imagined she'd wake up 30,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean, trapped on a private jet with a man whose name made grown criminals cross themselves in fear. One accidental door, one case of mistaken identity, one mafia boss who doesn't believe in second chances. Kyle Moretti built his empire on blood and silence, but the exhausted ICU nurse who stumbled into his world by mistake is about to crack open something he buried years ago, the human heart beneath the monster. This is their story. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. Vivian Hale's shift ended 3 hours ago, but the hospital kept her late because 2 gunshot victims crashed through the ER doors at 11 p.m. and the attending couldn't handle them alone. Now it was 2 in the morning and she smelled like antiseptic, blood, and the particular brand of exhaustion that comes from watching a 19-year-old kid bleed out on a gurney while his mother screamed in the waiting room. She pulled her jacket tighter against the October wind cutting across the JFK airport parking lot and tried to remember where she left her car. Row G. Or maybe H. Everything blurred together after 16-hour shift. Her phone buzzed. Another text from Marcus, her younger brother, asking when she'd be home. She typed back a lie about being 5 minutes away and shoved the phone into her pocket. The kid was 17 now, old enough to stay alone overnight. But ever since their parents died in that highway wreck 2 years ago, he got anxious when she worked late. Hell, she got anxious too. The bills piling up on their kitchen counter didn't care about grief or exhaustion. Vivian cut through a service corridor between terminals, taking a shortcut she'd discovered months ago, when late shifts became her permanent reality. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead. Her sneakers squeaked against polished floors. Somewhere in the distance, a commercial jet roared toward takeoff, and she thought about all the people on that plane heading somewhere that wasn't New Jersey, wasn't a studio apartment with peeling wallpaper, wasn't another double shift starting in 6 hours. She pushed through a door marked Authorized Personnel Only without thinking, her brain on autopilot, her body moving through muscle memory alone. The room on the other side wasn't the parking garage. It was a private aviation terminal, all marble floors, leather furniture, and the kind of silence that only exists in spaces designed for people who measure wealth in billions instead of paychecks. A woman in an elegant black suit stood near the entrance, tablet in hand, scanning the doorway like she'd been waiting. "Finally," the woman said, relief flooding her voice. "We were about to leave without you. Mr. Moretti doesn't appreciate delays." Vivian blinked. "I think there's been a—" "No time for apologies. The jet's ready." The woman's hand closed around Vivian's elbow with surprising strength, steering her toward the glass doors leading to the tarmac. "Your luggage is already on board. We'll be wheels up in 5 minutes." "Wait, I'm not—" But the wind swallowed her words as the woman guided her across the tarmac toward a sleek private jet that probably cost more than Vivian would earn in 10 lifetimes. The stairs were already lowered. A uniformed pilot stood at attention near the cockpit door. Everything moved too fast, the world tilting sideways, and Vivian's exhausted brain struggled to catch up with what was happening. The woman practically pushed her up the stairs. Inside, the jet looked like something from a movie. Cream leather seats, polished wood paneling, soft lighting that didn't quite hide the shadows. And sitting in one of those seats, staring out the window with the kind of stillness that suggested either complete control or complete detachment, was a man Vivian had never seen before but somehow recognized as dangerous. He didn't look up when she entered. Dark hair, expensive suit, the kind of bone structure that belonged on magazine covers except for the hardness around his mouth that suggested he'd seen things magazines don't photograph. Mid-30s, maybe. Impossible to tell. He had the ageless quality of men who've stopped counting years and started counting bodies instead. "Mr. Moretti," the woman said from behind Vivian. "She's here. We're ready for departure." The man turned his head slowly, and his eyes, dark, cold, completely unreadable, locked onto Vivian's face. She froze. He studied her for 3 long seconds that stretched into eternity, and something flickered across his expression. Confusion, maybe. Or recognition of something wrong, but then it disappeared behind that wall of control, and he simply nodded once. "Close the cabin door," he said. His voice was low, smooth, and carried the kind of authority that didn't require volume. "Tell the pilot we're cleared. Wait! Vivian tried again, but the woman was already gone, sealing the cabin door with a hydraulic hiss that sounded like a coffin closing. The jet's engines hummed to life. Vivian stood there, frozen in the aisle, her hospital scrubs visible beneath her jacket. Her hair still pulled back in the messy ponytail she'd tied 12 hours ago, her brain screaming that she needed to explain the mistake before this went any further. "Sit down," Kyle Moretti said without looking at her. "Turbulence during takeoff." "I'm not supposed to be here." The words finally made it out of her mouth. "There's been a mistake. I'm not whoever you think I am." He turned to face her fully now, and the weight of his attention felt like standing in front of an oncoming train. "You're not Isabelle Laurent." It wasn't a question, just a statement of fact. "No, I'm Vivian Hale. I'm a nurse. I work at Mount Sinai. I was trying to get to my car and I took a wrong turn and—" She gestured helplessly at the cabin around them. "I don't even know where this plane is going." "Paris," he said calmly. "We'll be there in 7 hours." The jet started moving, taxiing toward the runway, and Vivian grabbed the nearest seat to steady herself. "You need to tell them to stop. I can't go to Paris. I have a shift in 6 hours. My brother's home alone. I don't have my passport. I don't have anything." Kale watched her with the expression of a man solving a complex equation. "Your passport is in your jacket pocket. Checked it when security cleared you." Vivian's hand went automatically to her pocket, and her fingers closed around the small booklet she'd forgotten was there. She'd gotten it renewed last year during a brief moment of optimism when she thought maybe she'd take Marcus somewhere nice, give him something besides grief and hospital bills. Never used it. Never had the time or money. "That doesn't change anything," she said, her voice rising. "I'm not going to Paris. Stop the plane." "We're third in line for takeoff," Kyle said. "Even if I wanted to abort now, we'd have to taxi back, go through the departure process again, file new flight plans. It would take at least an hour. Maybe 2. He leaned back in his seat, and for the first time, something almost like amusement touched his eyes. Not kind amusement, more like a predator finding unexpected entertainment in watching prey struggle. "Alternatively," he continued, "you could sit down, except that the next 7 hours are already decided, and we'll sort this out when we land. I'll have you on the first commercial flight back to New York, first class. Consider it compensation for the inconvenience." Vivian stared at him. "You're insane." "Probably." He gestured to the seat across from him. "But you're still going to Paris. Sit down before you fall down." The jet reached the runway. The engines roared louder, and Vivian, because her exhausted brain couldn't think of any other option and her legs were shaking, collapsed into the seat across from Kyle Moretti. She buckled the seatbelt with trembling fingers. The jet accelerated, pressing her back into the leather, and then they were airborne, climbing steeply into the night sky. And Vivian watched the lights of New York shrink beneath them, while her entire life became something impossibly small and far away. Diswoku. The first 20 minutes passed in complete silence. Kale returned his attention to the window, his profile carved from stone, and Vivian sat across from him trying to process the reality that she was currently trapped on a private jet with a stranger flying toward another continent. Her phone sat useless in her pocket. No signal at cruising altitude. Marcus would wake up in a few hours and find her gone. The hospital would call asking why she missed her shift. Her entire carefully constructed life, fragile as it was, would collapse while she was somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean with a man who looked like he'd never experienced a single inconvenience in his entire life. "You're panicking," Kyle said, without turning from the window. "I can hear your breathing from here." "I'm not panicking," Vivian forced her voice steady. "I'm just trying to figure out if I'm being kidnapped or if this is the world's most expensive clerical error. Neither. You're a case of mistaken identity that went too far too fast." He finally looked at her again. "Isabelle Laurent was supposed to accompany me to Paris. Business associate. She's late frequently. When you walked through that door, my assistant assumed you were her and moved things forward before confirming. And you didn't think to correct that assumption?" Something dark flickered through his expression. "I wasn't paying attention. I was thinking about other things." The way he said it suggested those other things involved violence or grief, or both. Vivian recognized that tone from the ICU. The voice of someone holding themselves together through sheer willpower while something inside them screamed. What kind of business requires flying someone to Paris at 2 in the morning? She asked. The kind that doesn't appreciate questions. Fair enough. Vivian leaned back in her seat, exhaustion crashing over her like a wave now that the adrenaline was fading. I can't afford to miss work. I barely make rent as it is. If I lose this job, you won't. Cale pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. I'm wiring $50,000 to your account as compensation for the disruption. That should cover missed shifts and whatever other chaos this causes. Vivian's brain stuttered. $50,000. Is that insufficient? I can make it 100. I don't even know you. I'm not taking your money. You're taking it. He set the phone down. Because refusing it doesn't change the fact that you're on this plane, and refusing it won't make your problems disappear when you get home. Take the money. Fix whatever needs fixing. Move on. He said it like a man who'd solved thousands of problems by throwing money at them until they stopped being problems. And maybe that worked in his world. Maybe that was how billionaires operated, turning human disasters into transactions they could file away and forget. But Vivian's world didn't work that way. I'm still calling the police when we land, she said quietly. Call whoever you want. Cale's voice carried no concern whatsoever. Though I suspect they'll be more interested in why you were wandering through a restricted area of the airport than in pursuing charges against me for your assistant's mistake. He wasn't wrong. Vivian hated that he wasn't wrong. A flight attendant appeared from the back of the cabin. Young woman, professional smile, the kind of practiced warmth that comes from serving people who tip in amounts that change lives. Can I get you anything, Miss Hale? Vivian said. Vivian Hale. And no, I'm fine. Water for her, Cale interrupted. And coffee, if you have any left from earlier. The attendant nodded and disappeared. Vivian wanted to argue, wanted to refuse anything this man offered, but her mouth was dry and her head pounded from dehydration and too many hours awake. When the water appeared 2 minutes later, she drank half the bottle without stopping. Cale watched her with an expression she couldn't read. You're a nurse, he said eventually. I see you, Mount Sinai Hospital, 3 years. She set the bottle down. How'd you know? The scrubs? And you have that look. What look? The one people get when they spend too much time watching other people die. He said it without judgment, just observation. You see it in soldiers sometimes, doctors, anyone who works close to the edge. Vivian studied him across the cabin space. You sound like you'd know. I would. He didn't elaborate, and she didn't push. Some conversations required trust, and they had none. Just proximity forced by circumstance and altitude. The silence returned, but it felt different now, less hostile. More like two people stuck in an elevator together, waiting for the mechanism to start moving again. Vivian pulled out her phone, even though she knew it was useless. No service. No way to contact Marcus. No way to fix any of this until they landed. She opened her messages anyway, scrolling through the last conversation with her brother. Marcus. When you coming home? Vivian. Soon, baby. Promise, Marcus. You always say that. Marcus. I made mac and cheese for dinner. Saved you some. Her throat tightened. 17 years old and making himself dinner, saving her a plate, waiting up even though she told him not to. Their parents died and left them with nothing but each other and a pile of debt, and Marcus still acted like everything was fine because he thought that's what she needed. Your brother? Cale asked quietly. Vivian looked up, startled. How? You're smiling at your phone like it physically hurts. That's usually family. She almost lied. Almost told him to mind his own business. But exhaustion stripped away the filters, and the truth came out instead. Yeah, Marcus. He's 17. I've been raising him since our parents died 2 years ago. That's a lot. It's everything. Vivian locked her phone, shoved it back in her pocket. He's smart, really smart. Got accepted to 3 colleges last month. Full ride to 2 of them. But he's talking about taking a gap year to help with bills, and I know what that means. Gap year turns into 2 years, turns into forever. He'll end up like me, working double shifts, too tired to dream about anything beyond next month's rent. She didn't know why she was telling this stranger any of this. Maybe because he was a stranger, and strangers were safe in their irrelevance. Or maybe because she'd been holding it together for so long that the cracks were finally showing. Cale was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried something she hadn't heard before, something almost like understanding. My younger sister was smart too, he said. Wanted to be a doctor. She would have been brilliant at it. Past tense. Would have been. Vivian heard the shape of tragedy in those words. What happened? She asked carefully. Life happened. The kind that doesn't care about potential or fairness. He turned back to the window. She died when she was 19. Car accident. Drunk driver ran a red light. Killed her instantly. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with old grief that time had scabbed over but never healed. Vivian knew that kind of loss. Knew how it carved out pieces of you and left the empty spaces behind. I'm sorry, she said, because there was nothing else to say. Don't be. It was a long time ago. But the way he said it suggested time hadn't actually helped at all. Point is, I understand what it means to watch someone's potential get swallowed by circumstances. So when we land in Paris, I'll make sure your brother's college is paid for. All 4 years. Wherever he wants to go. Vivian's breath caught. What? You heard me. I can't accept. I'm not asking for acceptance. I'm just telling you what I'm going to do. Cale's tone left no room for argument. You can fight me on it when we're back on the ground. For now, try to get some sleep. We've got 6 hours left and you look like you haven't slept properly in weeks. He was right. She hadn't. But sleep felt impossible with everything spinning through her head. Marcus at home, her missed shift, the surreal reality of flying over the Atlantic with a man who casually offered to solve problems that had been crushing her for 2 years. Still, exhaustion won eventually. Vivian reclined the seat, pulled her jacket tighter around herself, and let her eyes close. The jet's engine hummed steady and low. Somewhere in the darkness behind her eyelids, she heard Kyle moving, footsteps soft against carpet, and then something warm settled over her shoulders. A blanket. Cashmere, probably. The kind that cost more than her monthly rent. Thank you, she mumbled, already halfway gone. No response. Just the sound of him returning to his seat, and then silence except for the plane carrying them both toward a city she'd never planned to see. Vivian woke to sunlight streaming through the cabin windows and the subtle shift in air pressure that meant they were descending. She sat up fast, disoriented, her neck stiff from sleeping in the chair. The blanket slid off her shoulders and pooled in her lap. Kyle sat in the same position as before, though his suit jacket was gone and his sleeves were rolled to his elbows. He was reading something on his tablet, his expression distant and unreadable. We're landing in 20 minutes, he said without looking up. There's a bathroom in the back if you want to clean up. Vivian stood on unsteady legs and made her way to the bathroom. It was nicer than her entire apartment. Marble counters, expensive soap, a mirror with lighting that didn't make her look half dead. She splashed water on her face, tried to fix her hair, and stared at her reflection like she might find answers there. None appeared. When she returned to the cabin, Kyle had his jacket back on and was typing something on his phone. My driver will take you directly to Charles de Gaulle for your return flight, he said. First class, like I promised. You'll be home by tonight. And what about you? I have business in the city. Meetings that can't be postponed. He glanced at her. Why? Vivian didn't know why she'd asked. Didn't know why the thought of getting immediately on another plane and flying back felt somehow wrong after everything. Maybe because the past 7 hours had cracked something open between them. Or maybe because she was too tired to think straight. Just curious, she said. The jet touched down smoothly, taxiing toward a private terminal far from the chaos of commercial arrivals. Through the window, Vivian could see Paris in the early morning light. Gray buildings, narrow streets, a city that looked like every photograph she'd ever seen, but somehow more real. The cabin door opened, and the same assistant from New York appeared at the top of the stairs. Different suit, same efficient expression. Mr. Moretti, your car is waiting. Miss Laurent sends her apologies for missing the flight. Family emergency. Handle it, Kyle said shortly. He looked at Vivian. This is where we part ways. But something in his face suggested he wasn't entirely certain about that. Vivian gathered her jacket, checked her pockets for her phone and passport. Everything was surreal. Standing in Paris, about to leave before she'd even seen the city, about to return to her life like this had been a strange dream she'd wake up from in a hospital break room. "Thank you," she said finally, "for the blanket and the water, and not being a complete nightmare about all this." A ghost of a smile touched Kael's mouth. "Low bar. You'd be surprised how many people wouldn't clear it." She started toward the door, but his voice stopped her. "Vivienne." She turned back. Kael stood in the center of the cabin, backlit by sunlight, and for just a second the mask slipped. Not much. Just enough to show exhaustion matching her own, and something else underneath. Something lonely. "When was the last time you did something that wasn't about surviving?" he asked quietly. The question hit harder than it should have. Vivienne opened her mouth to answer and realized she couldn't remember. 2 years of double shifts and bills and holding Marcus together had erased everything else. "I don't know," she admitted. Kael nodded slowly, like she'd confirmed something he already suspected. "Paris is beautiful in October. You're already here. Your brother thinks you're working late anyway." He gestured toward the door. "You can get on that return flight and go back to your life. Or you can stay in the city for a day, see something besides hospital walls, and fly home tomorrow." "Why would you offer that?" "Because I made a mistake that pulled you out of your life for 12 hours. The least I can do is give you a different 12 hours before sending you back." It was insane, completely insane. She had responsibilities, a job, a brother waiting at home. She couldn't just stay in Paris because a billionaire stranger suggested it. But another part of her, the part that had been slowly suffocating under the weight of survival, whispered that maybe insanity was exactly what she needed. "I don't have any clothes," she said, and heard herself already giving in. "No hotel reservation, no plan. I'll handle all of it. One day. Then you go home." Kael held her gaze. No strings, no expectations, just Paris. Vivienne thought about Marcus's text from last night. "You always say that, always promising to come home soon, and always too tired when she finally made it, always choosing survival over living." Maybe he deserved a sister who remembered what living looked like. "One day," she said. Kael's expression shifted. Not quite a smile, but something close. "One day." He moved past her toward the door, and Vivienne followed him down the stairs into French morning air that smelled like rain and diesel and possibility. A black Mercedes waited on the tarmac, driver standing at attention, and Kael opened the door himself, gesturing for her to get in first. She slid into the back seat. He followed. The door closed, sealing them into leather-scented silence, and the car pulled away from the private terminal, heading toward the city proper. Vivienne watched Paris unfold through the window. Cafes opening their doors, delivery trucks unloading bread, people walking to work with cigarettes dangling from tired fingers. "Where are we going?" she asked. Kael was already typing something on his phone, coordinating whatever needed coordinating to make a spontaneous day in Paris happen for a stranger he'd accidentally kidnapped. "Somewhere you can sleep for a few hours, then somewhere you can eat food that isn't from a hospital cafeteria. After that..." He looked at her, and for the first time since she'd stumbled into his world, she saw something almost like lightness in his expression. "After that," he said, "we'll figure it out." The Mercedes merged onto the highway, carrying them both deeper into a city that felt like a story neither of them had planned to tell. And Vivienne, sitting beside a man she didn't know but somehow understood, felt the first spark of something she'd forgotten existed. Not happiness. Not yet. But maybe the possibility of it. The hotel wasn't a hotel in any recognizable sense. It was a private residence in the 16th arrondissement, 7 stories of cream-colored stone tucked behind iron gates and manicured hedges that blocked the street view entirely. The kind of place that didn't advertise, didn't take reservations, and probably cost more per night than Vivienne's annual salary. Kael led her through a side entrance where a silver-haired man in an impeccable suit greeted them with the kind of deference reserved for royalty. No questions asked, no registration required, just a set of keys produced from a desk drawer and a murmured conversation in rapid French that Vivienne couldn't follow. "Third floor," Kael said, handing her one of the keys. "The suite has everything you need. Sleep as long as you want. I'll be back around 2. "Where are you going?" "Meetings." He adjusted his cufflinks, and the gesture looked automatic, something done 10,000 times before. "The kind where people expect me to show up looking like I give a damn." Vivian wanted to ask what kind of business required flying to Paris on 2 hours' notice, but the exhaustion was catching up with her again, and her curiosity couldn't compete with the weight pressing down on her eyelids. The suite was ridiculous. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a private garden, furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum, a bed large enough to sleep 4 people comfortably. Vivian kicked off her sneakers, peeled off her jacket, and collapsed face first into pillows that probably cost more than her car. She was asleep in 30 seconds. When she woke, afternoon light was streaming through gauze curtains, and someone was moving around in the outer room. Vivian sat up fast, her heart hammering, before remembering where she was. Paris. Third-floor suite. Billionaire stranger who'd accidentally brought her here. She found Kael standing near the window, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in Italian with the kind of cold authority that made her spine straighten, even though she couldn't understand the words. He'd changed clothes, dark jeans, black sweater, still expensive, but less formal, more dangerous somehow. He ended the call when he noticed her awake. "There's clothes in the closet," he said. "I had someone pick up basics while you were sleeping. Sizes might be off, but it's better than hospital scrubs." Vivian looked down at herself. Wrinkled shirt, pants that still smelled faintly of antiseptic. She must have looked like hell. "You bought me clothes." "I had someone buy you clothes. There's a difference." "Not much of one." "True." Kael moved away from the window. "How'd you sleep?" "Like someone hit me with a truck." Vivian stood, running her hands through her tangled hair. "What time is it?" 3:30. You slept for almost 6 hours. That explained why her body felt halfway human again instead of completely wrecked. She made her way to the closet he'd mentioned and found an array of options that looked like they'd been pulled from a boutique catalog. Jeans, sweaters, a couple of dresses, even shoes in approximately her size. "This is insane," she said. "You've mentioned that already." "I'm going to keep mentioning it until it stops being true." Kael almost smiled. Almost. "Get dressed. I'll wait outside." He left, closing the door behind him, and Vivian stood alone in a Paris hotel suite, trying to process the surreal reality of her situation. 24 hours ago, she'd been elbow-deep in an emergency intubation while a resident fumbled with equipment. Now she was pulling on designer jeans that fit better than anything she'd owned in years. She chose simple. Dark jeans, cream sweater, ankle boots that weren't heels but weren't sneakers either. There was a bathroom attached to the suite, and she spent 10 minutes trying to make her face look less exhausted before giving up and settling for presentable. Kael was waiting in the hallway, leaning against the wall with his phone in hand. He looked up when she emerged, and something flickered through his expression before the mask returned. "You clean up well," he said. "Don't sound so surprised." "I'm not, just making an observation." They took the stairs down instead of the elevator, and Vivian noticed the way Kael moved, controlled, aware of every exit and entrance, like someone who'd spent years calculating risk without thinking about it. The silver-haired man from earlier appeared as they reached the ground floor, murmuring something to Kael in French. Kael's jaw tightened. "When?" "Une heure." "An hour. Handle it. I'm not available until tomorrow morning." The man nodded and disappeared, and Kael gestured toward the door. "Let's go before someone else decides today is a good day to create problems." Outside, Paris was fully awake. Tourists clogging the sidewalks, cars honking at intersections, the smell of roasting chestnuts mixing with cigarette smoke and exhaust fumes. Kael didn't head toward the Mercedes waiting at the curb. Instead, he started walking, hands in his pockets, moving like someone who actually knew where he was going. Vivian fell into step beside him. "So what's the plan? Tourist highlights? Eiffel Tower? Arc de Triomphe?" "I'm not taking you to the Eiffel Tower." "Why not?" "Because it's full of people selling cheap keychains and taking selfies. You want to see Paris? I'll show you Paris, not the version they print on postcards." They walked for 20 minutes through narrow streets that twisted and turned like a labyrinth, designed to confuse invaders. Kael navigated without hesitation, turning down alleys that didn't look like alleys, and emerging into courtyards hidden behind unmarked doors. Vivian tried to keep track of where they were going and gave up after the 7th turn. "You spend a lot of time here," she said. It wasn't a question. "Enough." "Business? Sometimes?" He glanced at her. "Sometimes other things." They ended up at a small restaurant tucked into the ground floor of a building that looked like it had been standing since Napoleon. No sign outside, just a red door and windows covered with lace curtains. Kael pushed the door open without knocking, and a woman's voice called out in French from somewhere inside. The interior was warm, dim, and smelled like garlic and wine and bread baking somewhere out of sight. Only 4 tables, all empty except for an elderly couple in the corner sharing a bottle of red. The woman who'd called out emerged from the kitchen, 60-something, gray hair tied back, apron stained with decades of cooking. She saw Kael and her face transformed. Mon Dieu, Kael, 3 mois sans nouvelles. Kael submitted to being kissed on both cheeks and responded in fluent French that flowed too fast for Vivian to catch more than a few words. The woman kept talking, gesturing at Vivian, asking questions with the kind of directness that suggested she'd known Kael long enough to stop being intimidated by whatever he represented. English, Margot, Kael said finally. She doesn't speak French. Margot switched languages without missing a beat. You bring a girl to my restaurant. This is new. You never bring girls. You never bring anyone. She's not... Kael stopped, seemed to recalculate. We're just here for lunch. Lunch. Margot looked at Vivian with open curiosity. What's your name, darling? Vivian. American? New Jersey. Ah, good. Americans appreciate food properly, not like the British. Margot waved them toward a table near the window. Sit. I'll bring you something that will make you remember why living is worth the trouble. She disappeared back into the kitchen before either of them could respond. Kael pulled out a chair for Vivian, old-fashioned gesture that felt wrong coming from someone who moved like a predator, and then sat across from her. Friend of yours? Vivian asked. I've known her a long time. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. But his tone wasn't harsh, more resigned. Margot doesn't ask questions about what I do, and I don't correct her assumptions about who I am. It works. Food started arriving before Vivian could push further. Bread still hot from the oven, butter that tasted like it had never seen a factory, some kind of soup that filled the air with the smell of herbs and slow-cooked vegetables. Then fish prepared in a way that made her previous understanding of seafood seem inadequate, and vegetables that actually tasted like vegetables instead of something designed to exist on a grocery store shelf. They ate in silence for a while, and Vivian realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd had a meal that wasn't something microwaved between shifts or grabbed from a vending machine at 3 a.m. This is incredible, she said finally. Margot used to cook for a Michelin-starred place in the 8th, quit after they told her to make the portion smaller and the prices higher. Kael tore off a piece of bread. Now she runs this place, feeds people who actually appreciate food instead of trying to impress their mistresses. How'd you meet her? Long story. We've got time. Kael studied her across the table, and Vivian saw him weighing whether to trust her with truth or dismiss her with another deflection. Finally, he set down his fork. I was 22, newly arrived in Paris, had some money, no connections, and a lot of ambition I didn't know what to do with. Got into an argument with some locals who didn't appreciate an American showing up in their neighborhood like he owned the place. He paused. They beat me half to death in an alley 3 blocks from here. Margot found me bleeding on her doorstep at 4 a.m, brought me inside, cleaned me up, fed me soup. Never asked why I was there or who'd put me in that condition. Vivian tried to imagine Kael young and vulnerable and failing. He seemed like someone who'd been born dangerous. What happened to the guys who jumped you? They apologized eventually. Eventually. His expression suggested the apology hadn't been voluntary. Point is, Margot saved my life that night. I've been coming back ever since. Margot reappeared with dessert, something involving chocolate and cream and pastry that looked like it required an engineering degree to construct. She set it in front of them with obvious pride, then turned to Kael with her hands on her hips. You look terrible, she said bluntly. Thinner, more tired. When did you last sleep properly? I'm fine, Margot. Fine is what people say when they're lying. She glanced at Vivian. You. Make sure he eats. He forgets sometimes, gets too focused on whatever darkness he's chasing. I'll do my best, Vivian said, startled. Margot patted Kael's shoulder with the kind of affection that suggested she'd given up trying to save him, but kept trying anyway. Be careful, mon cher. Whatever you're doing, it's eating you from inside. I can see it. She returned to the kitchen, and Kael stared at the dessert like it might contain answers. She's right, you know, Vivian said quietly. You look exhausted. So do you. I have an excuse. I work 80-hour weeks in a trauma unit. What's yours? Kael picked up his spoon, set it back down. Some weeks are harder than others. Because of your friend, the one who died. His eyes snapped to hers, sharp and suddenly dangerous. Who told you that? Nobody. You mentioned it on the plane. Vivian held his gaze. Said he died during a negotiation, that you couldn't save him. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Kael's hands were flat on the table, knuckles white, and Vivian saw the violence lurking just beneath his control. Saw how easy it would be for him to flip from civilized to something far worse. I shouldn't have said that, he said softly. I don't talk about Marco. Maybe you should. Why? So you can analyze me like one of your patients? Figure out what's broken so you can fix it? No, so you can stop carrying it alone. Vivian leaned forward. I've held enough people while they were dying to know what that weight looks like. You've got it all over your face. For 3 seconds, Kael looked like he might explode, might flip the table, might walk out and leave her sitting there with half-eaten dessert and no way to find her way back to the hotel. Then he exhaled slowly, and the tension bled out of him like air from a punctured tire. Marco was my best friend, he said finally. More than that, he was my brother in every way that mattered. We built everything together, spent 15 years covering each other's backs, trusting each other with secrets that could destroy entire organizations. His voice was flat, emotionless, like he was reading from a script. 3 months ago, we went to Milan for a meeting, cartel negotiations. High-stakes stuff, but nothing we hadn't handled before. Except this time someone decided rules didn't matter. Decided violence was easier than compromise. He stopped, swallowed hard. They killed him in front of me, he continued. Put 3 bullets in his chest while I watched. While I stood there like a fucking coward and did nothing because I was calculating angles and exit strategies instead of... His jaw clenched. Instead of saving the one person who actually mattered. Vivian's chest tightened. That's not cowardice. That's survival. Tell that to Marco. I can't. He's dead. But you're not. She reached across the table and her fingers brushed his wrist. And punishing yourself for surviving doesn't bring him back. Kael looked at her hand on his wrist like he'd forgotten what human touch felt like. You don't know anything about my world. No. But I know about guilt. About blaming yourself for things you couldn't control. Vivian pulled her hand back. My parents died because I wasn't there. I was working a shift. They were driving home from Marcus's school play. Drunk driver hit them on Route 9 and they died before the ambulance arrived. If I'd been there instead of at the hospital, maybe I could have driven them. Maybe they'd still be alive. That's not how it works. Exactly. She held his gaze. So maybe apply that same logic to yourself. Silence stretched between them, heavy with shared grief and the particular loneliness that comes from losing people who can never be replaced. Outside, Paris continued its afternoon rhythm. Voices calling, cars honking, the city indifferent to individual suffering. Finally, Kael stood. Come on, let's get out of here. He left cash on the table, far more than the meal cost probably, and they stepped back into the cold October air. Margot called goodbye from the kitchen, and Kael raised his hand without looking back. They walked for an hour without destination, following the River Seine as it curved through the city like a gray snake. Kael pointed out buildings with history he'd learned from someone who wasn't here anymore. Vivian told him about Marcus's fear of pigeons after one stole his sandwich when he was 6. Neither of them mentioned death or guilt or the weight they'd both been carrying. Eventually they ended up at a bridge covered in padlocks, tourists' ritual, lovers' promises, metal declarations that time would eventually rust into nothing. People actually believe this works, Vivian said, running her fingers over the engraved names. Like a lock on a bridge will keep 2 people together forever. People believe lots of stupid things. Kale leaned against the railing, staring at the water below. Love, loyalty, the idea that good things last. You don't believe in any of that? I believe in power, money, fear. Those are reliable. He glanced at her. Everything else disappears eventually. That's bleak. That's experience. Vivian studied his profile against the fading light. What happened to you? Besides Marco, I mean. What turned you into someone who only believes in fear? Life. He pushed off the railing. Come on, it's getting dark. We should head back. But Vivian didn't move. You're running. What? Every time I get close to something real, you change the subject or walk away. You're running from whatever you don't want me to see. Kyle turned to face her fully, and his expression was harder than she'd seen it all day. You don't want to see it, Vivian, trust me. Maybe I do. Why? What difference does it make? Tomorrow you get on a plane and go back to your life and I go back to mine. This whole thing is just a pause. A mistake that turned into a weird day in Paris. That's all. Is that what you tell yourself? His hands flexed at his sides. What do you want from me? The truth. Vivian stepped closer. Who are you really? Not the guy buying me lunch at hidden restaurants. Not the guy throwing money at problems. Who are you when nobody's watching? I'm nobody you want to know. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. Kale's voice dropped lower, more dangerous. You want the truth? Fine. I'm a man who's built his entire existence on violence and control. I own things I shouldn't own. I hurt people who get in my way. I've done things that would make you sick if you knew the details. Marco's death wasn't some tragic accident. It was the consequence of the life we chose, the life I chose. And it will catch up with me eventually, the same way it caught up with him. He stopped, breathing hard, like the confession had cost something. That's who I am, he finished. That's the truth. Still want to keep pushing? Vivian should have been afraid, should have backed away, should have insisted on leaving right now, getting away from this man who just admitted to being exactly as dangerous as he looked. Instead, she stayed exactly where she was. I've spent 2 years watching people die, she said quietly. Some of them were good people. Some of them probably weren't. But at the end, when they're bleeding out on my table, none of that matters. Good or bad, they all bleed the same. They all get scared the same. She held his gaze. You're not special because you've done terrible things, KL. You're just human, like everyone else. That's where you're wrong. His voice was barely above a whisper. I stopped being human a long time ago. I don't believe that. Then you're naive. Maybe. Or maybe you're lying to yourself because being a monster is easier than being someone who hurts. The words hung in the cold air between them, and Vivian saw the exact moment they landed. Saw Kael's expression crack, just for a second, before he rebuilt the wall. We should go, he said. This time, Vivian didn't argue. They walked back in silence as the city lights flickered on one by one, turning Paris into something beautiful and cold and distant. Kael's phone buzzed repeatedly, but he ignored it. They crossed the bridge, descended stone steps, followed streets that grew quieter as they moved away from the tourist centers. The hotel appeared eventually, its iron gates closed against the evening darkness. Kael pushed them open with a code punched into a keypad, and they crossed the private courtyard in silence. Inside the lobby, the silver-haired man from earlier was waiting. He approached Kael immediately, speaking in rapid French that sounded urgent. Kael's expression darkened with every word. When? He asked. Il y a 2 heures. Ils attendent en haut. Kael cursed softly. Tell them I need 15 minutes. The man nodded and disappeared up the stairs. Kael turned to Vivian, and she saw exhaustion and frustration warring behind his eyes. I have to handle something, he said. Business that won't wait. The kind that involves people with guns? He almost smiled. The kind that involves people with worse things than guns. Should I be worried? No, you're not part of this. He stopped, seemed to recalibrate. Just stay in your suite, order room service, watch television. I'll be done in an hour. And then? Then we'll figure out tomorrow. He moved toward the stairs, but Vivian's voice stopped him. Kael. He looked back. Be careful. Something soft flickered through his expression. I'm always careful. No, you're not. You're reckless pretending to be controlled. I've seen enough trauma to know the difference. He held her gaze for a long moment, and Vivian saw the war happening behind his eyes. The part that wanted to trust her fighting the part that knew better. Go upstairs, he said finally. Lock the door. Don't answer it for anyone except me. Then he was gone, taking the stairs two at a time, and Vivian stood alone in the lobby, wondering what kind of business required locked doors and hushed warnings. She made it exactly 45 minutes before curiosity killed restraint. The suite was beautiful and comfortable and suffocating. Vivian tried watching French television without understanding the words, tried ordering food she didn't want, tried telling herself that Kael's business was none of her concern and she should just stay put like he'd asked. But the edges of the conversation from the bridge kept circling through her mind. I own things I shouldn't own. I hurt people who get in my way. What exactly did that mean? The hallway outside was empty and silent. Vivian stepped out carefully, closing the door behind her with a soft click that sounded too loud in the stillness. She moved toward the stairs, following the path Kael had taken earlier. Voices drifted down from somewhere above. Low, tense, speaking in Italian, now instead of French. Vivian couldn't understand the words, but she recognized the cadence of argument, of threats being exchanged behind diplomatic language. She climbed higher, following the voices to the 5th floor, where a door stood slightly ajar. Light spilled through the gap, and the voices were clearer now, angry. Vivian knew she should turn around, should go back to her suite and pretend ignorance, should— That's not your decision to make, Kael's voice, cold as January. It became my decision when you stopped responding to communications. A different voice, male, accented. 3 months of silence, Kael. The families are getting restless. They want answers. They want blood. Marco's death doesn't require more blood. Marco's death requires vengeance. Otherwise we look weak. Otherwise every 2-bit cartel thinks they can target us without consequences. I'm not starting a war over revenge. Then what are you doing? Hiding in Paris, playing tourist with some American girl while your empire crumbles? Silence. Then movement. Careful, Kael said softly, and Vivian heard the violence underneath the word. You're talking about things that aren't your concern. Everything is my concern when you're compromised, when you're distracted by— The crash of furniture hitting a wall cut off the rest. Vivian flinched, pressing herself against the hallway wall, her heart hammering, more shouting in Italian. Another crash. Then Kael's voice, low and deadly. Get out. Tell the families I'll handle this my way. Anyone who has a problem with that can come say it to my face. Footsteps. The door swung open fully and 2 men emerged. Expensive suits, dead eyes, the kind of people who made careers out of violence. They saw Vivian and stopped, exchanging glances that spoke volumes. American girl, one of them said. She's your distraction? She's none of your concern. Kael appeared in the doorway behind them, and Vivian's breath caught. His knuckles were split and bleeding. His shirt was torn at the collar, and his eyes were empty of everything except cold fury. Leave, he told them. Now. The men left without another word, brushing past Vivian like she didn't exist. Their footsteps echoed down the stairwell, and then there was just silence and Kael staring at her from the doorway. I told you to stay in your suite, he said. I know. I told you to lock the door. I know. Then why— He stopped, closed his eyes briefly. You heard. Most of it. Not enough to understand, but enough to— Vivian gestured helplessly. Enough to confirm what you told me on the bridge. Kael leaned against the doorframe, and suddenly he looked more tired than she'd seen him all day. You should get on a plane tonight. First flight out. Go home before you see more than you can forget. Is that what you want? What I want doesn't matter. What's smart matters, and staying here isn't smart. Vivian walked closer, studying his torn knuckles, the bruise forming on his jaw. Did you kill them? No. But you've killed people before. He met her eyes without flinching. Yes. How many? Does it matter? I don't know, does it? Kael pushed off the doorframe, and Vivian saw him deciding something, saw the exact moment he chose honesty over protection. I don't keep count, he said. Not anymore. Some were necessary. Some were orders I gave. Some were, he trailed off. Some were just because I could, because I was angry or tired or numb, and violence was easier than feeling anything else. Are you trying to scare me away? I'm trying to be honest. You wanted the truth. This is it. He gestured at the room behind him. I'm not a billionaire investor. I'm a criminal. I run an empire built on trafficking, money laundering, extortion, and every other sin you can imagine. Marco helped me build it, and now he's dead because that world catches up with everyone eventually. Vivian absorbed the words, testing them against everything she'd seen today. The way people lowered their eyes when he entered rooms, the security always trailing in the distance, the easy violence in the way he'd moved toward those men. It fit. All of it fit. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because you're standing here instead of running. Because you keep pushing toward the truth, even when I'm giving you every reason to walk away. Because, he stopped, jaw working, because I'm tired of lying to you. You could have kept lying. I would have left tomorrow without knowing any of this. Yeah, I could have. Kale's expression shifted into something raw. But then I'd be lying to the first person in 3 months who made me remember what it felt like to be human instead of monstrous. The confession hit harder than Vivian expected. She stood in the dim hallway with a criminal who'd just admitted to murder, and worse, and instead of fear, she felt something far more dangerous. Understanding. I should go home, she said quietly. You should. This is insane. Completely. I don't even know you. No, you don't. Vivian moved closer anyway, closing the distance between them until she could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. Tell me to leave. Tell me you don't want me here. Kale's hands clenched at his sides. I can't. Why not? Because it would be a lie. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Because for the first time since Marco died, I don't feel empty when I look at someone. And I know that's selfish and dangerous and probably the worst thing I could do to you, but Vivian kissed him. She didn't plan it, didn't think about consequences or wisdom or any of the 1,000 reasons this was a terrible idea. She just moved forward and pressed her mouth to his, and Kale froze for half a second before kissing her back like a man drowning. His hands came up to frame her face, and the kiss turned desperate, messy, and raw, and nothing like the polished version of him she'd seen all day. This was the truth beneath the control. The grief and loneliness and hunger for something real in a world built on lies. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Vivian's hands were fisted in his torn shirt and his forehead was pressed against hers. This is a mistake, he said. Probably. You should still leave. I know, but neither of them moved. They stood in the hallway while Paris hummed outside, and Vivian felt the exact moment she crossed the line from curious to complicit. From tourist to something far more dangerous. Kyle pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. If you stay, everything changes. You can't unknow what you know. You can't walk away clean. I'm a trauma nurse. I stopped being clean 2 years ago. That's not the same. Maybe not. But I'm still not leaving. Something shifted in Kyle's expression. Relief mixing with resignation, mixing with want. Why? Because I spent 2 years surviving, and you made me remember what living feels like. Vivian's hands loosened their grip on his shirt. And maybe that's stupid. Maybe I'll regret this tomorrow. But right now, standing here with you, I feel more alive than I have since my parents died. Kyle studied her face like he was memorizing it. I'm going to hurt you eventually. It's what I do. Then hurt me later. Right now, just... She trailed off, not sure how to finish. Just what? Just be human with me, for tonight, before we both remember all the reasons this doesn't work. For a long moment, Kyle said nothing. Then he took her hand, careful, like she might break, and led her back toward the stairs. Not to her suite, to his, on the floor above, where the bed was larger and the windows overlooked the garden and the rest of Paris fell away into darkness beyond the iron gates. He closed the door behind them, and Vivian heard the lock slide into place with a finality that felt like choosing. Last chance, Kyle said. You can still walk away. Vivian looked at this dangerous man with blood on his knuckles and grief in his eyes and made the worst decision of her life. I'm not walking anywhere. Kyle crossed the distance between them in 2 steps, and kissed her like the world was ending. Like this was the last moment of peace before war came knocking. And Vivian kissed him back, both of them falling into something they couldn't name and probably shouldn't want. Outside, somewhere in the Paris darkness, someone was making phone calls. Someone was planning. Someone was watching. But inside that room, for a few stolen hours, Kyle Moretti wasn't a criminal, and Vivian Hale wasn't drowning in responsibility. They were just two people trying to remember what it felt like to be human. And tomorrow would come eventually, with all its consequences. But not yet. Vivian woke to gray morning light filtering through unfamiliar curtains and the immediate knowledge that everything had changed. Her clothes were scattered across expensive carpet. Kyle's arm was draped across her waist, his breathing deep and even against her shoulder blade. The room smelled like his cologne and sex, and decisions that couldn't be unmade. She lay still, staring at the ceiling, trying to reconcile the version of herself who'd walked through airport terminals yesterday with the woman who'd spent the night in a criminal's bed. The distance between those two people felt impossible to measure. Kyle stirred behind her, his arm tightening briefly before he woke fully. She felt him go rigid as reality reassembled itself. "You're still here," he said quietly. "Where else would I be?" Gone. Regretting this. Already on a plane home. Vivian turned to face him. His hair was disheveled, his expression unguarded in a way she suspected few people ever saw. The morning light caught the scar along his collarbone. Old wound, knife probably, the kind that spoke of violence survived rather than avoided. "Do you want me to regret it?" she asked. "I want you to be smart, which means getting as far from me as possible before my world swallows you whole." Little late for that warning. Kale's mouth twitched toward something that wasn't quite a smile. "Yeah, I know." His phone buzzed on the nightstand, shattering the fragile intimacy. He reached for it, read whatever message appeared on the screen, and his expression shifted from soft to stone in half a second. "What is it?" Vivian asked. "Work." He sat up, running his hand through his hair. "The kind that won't wait." "The kind from last night? With the men who wanted blood?" "Related." Kyle swung his legs out of bed, already moving toward the bathroom. "I need to handle something. Could take a few hours. You should use that time to pack. Get to the airport. Go home while you still can." Vivian sat up, pulling the sheet around herself. "You keep saying that. Go home. Get away. Like I'm some civilian who stumbled into a war zone." "You are a civilian who stumbled into a war zone." He turned to face her from the bathroom doorway. Last night was last night. But daylight doesn't change facts. My life is dangerous. Being near me is dangerous. And if you stay, that danger follows you back to New Jersey, to your brother, to everyone you care about. The words hit like cold water. Vivian hadn't thought past Paris, hadn't considered what it meant for her actual life if she got involved with someone whose business partners threatened him with guns. "Then what was last night?" she asked. "Just scratching an itch? Killing time between meetings?" "No." Kale's voice softened. "Last night was the first time in 3 months I felt human. The first time I wanted to be human instead of just going through the motions." But wanting something doesn't make it safe, doesn't make it right. He disappeared into the bathroom, and Vivian heard water running. When he emerged 5 minutes later, he was already dressed in fresh clothes pulled from a closet she hadn't noticed. Dark suit, crisp shirt, the armor of his public face sliding back into place. "I'll have my driver take you to the airport," he said, adjusting his cuffs. "First-class ticket home. 50,000 in your account like I promised. Enough to cover your brother's college if you're smart about it." "You're paying me off. I'm compensating you for a disruption I caused." "That's not what this feels like." Kale's jaw tightened. "Then what does it feel like?" "Like you're running. Again." Vivian stood, wrapped in the sheet, and crossed the room to stand directly in front of him. "Every time something gets real, you throw money at it and walk away. That's how my world works. Everything's a transaction. Everyone has a price." His eyes were hard now, the softness from earlier completely gone. "You want to stay? Fine. But don't pretend you know what that means. Don't pretend last night makes you part of this life. Then tell me what it means. Explain it instead of just pushing me away. It means people like those men from last night become your problem. It means federal investigations. Rival families looking for leverage. It means every person you love becomes a target because that's how wars are fought in my world. His voice dropped lower. It means your brother gets followed home from school by men with guns. It means your hospital colleagues get questioned by agents asking why you're associated with known criminals. It means your entire life gets dissected and destroyed piece by piece until there's nothing left except regret. The description was vivid enough that Vivian could picture it, could see Marcus terrified, running, could imagine FBI agents showing up at Mount Sinai asking questions she couldn't answer. So that's it, she said. We pretend last night didn't happen. I go home. You stay here. We both move on. Yes. And you'll be fine with that? You'll just forget? Something cracked in Khalil's expression. No, but I'll live with it because the alternative is watching you get destroyed by association. His phone buzzed again. This time he answered it immediately, speaking in rapid Italian that sounded like orders being given. When he hung up, he looked more tired than she'd seen him. I have to go, he said. The car will be here in 30 minutes. Use it or don't, your choice. He moved toward the door, but Vivian's voice stopped him. Khail. He turned back, and she saw the war happening behind his eyes. The part that wanted to stay fighting, the part that knew better. If I leave, she said carefully, will I ever see you again? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither of them wanted to examine too closely. No, he said finally. It's better that way. Then he was gone, the door closing with a soft click that sounded like finality. Vivian didn't go to the airport. She told herself it was because she needed to think, because rushing back to New Jersey wouldn't solve anything, because maybe Khail was right about the danger but wrong about the solution. Really, she just wasn't ready to let go of the feeling she'd found in this city, the version of herself that existed outside survival mode, the possibility that life could be something more than endless shifts and unpaid bills. She showered in Khail's bathroom, dressed in yesterday's borrowed clothes, and wandered down to the hotel lobby. The silver-haired man was at his desk, typing something on an ancient computer that looked out of place in the elegant surroundings. Mademoiselle, he said, without looking up. Mr. Moretti's driver is waiting outside. He has instructions to take you to Charles de Gaulle. I'm not going to the airport yet. Now he looked up, one eyebrow raised. Mr. Moretti was very clear about his wishes. Mr. Moretti doesn't get to make my decisions. Vivian crossed her arms. I'm staying in Paris for another day. If that's a problem, I'll find a different hotel. The man studied her for a long moment, and something almost like approval flickered across his face. No need. The suite is paid through the weekend. Do as you like. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You're making a mistake. Everyone keeps telling me that. Perhaps you should listen. But his tone wasn't unkind, more resigned, like he'd watched too many people make the same mistake, and knew words wouldn't change anything. Vivian left the hotel, stepping into cold October air that smelled like rain threatening. She had no plan, no destination, just the vague need to move, to think, to figure out whether walking away from Khail was wisdom or cowardice. She ended up at the Seine again, leaning against the same bridge where they'd argued yesterday. Tourists flooded the walkways now, but couples taking selfies, families arguing about which museum to visit next, street vendors selling postcards nobody needed. Vivian's phone buzzed in her pocket. Marcus calling for the third time this morning. She'd been avoiding his calls, not ready to explain where she was or why she wasn't home. But guilt finally won over avoidance. Hey, she answered. Where the hell are you? Marcus's voice was tight with worry. You didn't come home. You're not answering. The hospital said you called in sick. What's going on? I'm fine. I'm just dealing with something. Dealing with what? Viv, you're scaring me. I'm in Paris. The words came out before she could stop them. Silence. Then, you're in Paris. It's complicated. No shit, it's complicated. You were working a shift yesterday. Now you're in Paris? His voice rose. Are you in trouble? Did something happen? I'm not in trouble. I just needed to get away for a day. Clear my head. Clear your head in Paris. Okay. Sure. That's totally normal. Marcus's tone dripped with sarcasm, masking genuine concern. Does this have anything to do with the $50,000 that just appeared in your account? Vivian's stomach dropped. You checked my account? You gave me access for emergencies, remember? I was trying to pay the electric bill and saw the deposit. $50,000, Viv, from some LLC I've never heard of. What the hell is going on? She closed her eyes, pressing her forehead against the cold metal railing. It's complicated. You keep saying that. Start uncomplicated it. I can't, not over the phone. Then come home, right now. Get on a plane and come home so we can figure this out together. His voice cracked slightly. Please. You're all I have left. If something happens to you, nothing's going to happen to me. You don't know that. You're in a foreign country with 50 grand from nowhere and you won't tell me why. That's the setup to every bad movie where the sister ends up dead in a ditch. Jesus, Marcus. I'm serious. Whatever's going on, it's not worth it. Come home. Vivian heard the fear underneath his anger, and guilt twisted in her chest. He was 17 and scared, and she'd spent 2 years telling him everything would be okay as long as they stuck together. Now she'd disappeared to Paris without explanation, and he was alone trying to make sense of it. I'll be home tomorrow, she said. I promise. One more day, and then I'm on a plane. You better be. And when you get here, you're explaining everything. Deal. She hung up and stood staring at the river, trying to reconcile the responsibilities waiting in New Jersey with the life she'd glimpsed in Paris. It felt impossible, like trying to exist in two worlds simultaneously. Her phone rang again immediately. Unknown number. Hello? Miss Hale. A woman's voice, crisp and professional, American accent with traces of East Coast. My name is Agent Sarah Chen. I'm with the FBI's Transnational Organized Crime Division. I need to speak with you about your association with Kyle Moretti. The world tilted sideways. Vivian gripped the railing harder, her knuckles going white. I don't know what you're talking about. You were seen entering a private residence with Mr. Moretti yesterday afternoon. You spent the night at that location, and you're currently in Paris using funds transferred from one of his shell companies. Agent Chen's voice remained pleasantly neutral. So let's skip the part where you pretend ignorance and move to the part where you answer questions. I'm not answering anything. That's your right. But understand that Kyle Moretti is under active federal investigation for racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. Anyone associated with him becomes a person of interest. That includes you, Miss Hale. Vivian's mouth went dry. I haven't done anything illegal. Not yet. But accepting money from a criminal organization is a good start. And depending on what you know about his operations, refusing to cooperate could be construed as obstruction. Are you threatening me? I'm informing you of consequences. Agent Chen paused. Look, I've read your file. ICU nurse, clean record, raising your younger brother alone. You seem like someone who made a mistake rather than a criminal. So I'm offering you a way out. Come in for a voluntary interview. Tell us what you know about Moretti's operations. Help us build a case. In exchange, any potential charges against you disappear. I don't know anything about his operations. I met him 2 days ago. Then this should be a very short conversation. Another pause. I'm in Paris through the weekend. My contact information will be in your email within the hour. Think carefully about your next move, Miss Hale, because the path you're on leads nowhere good. The call ended. Vivian stood frozen on the bridge, tourists flowing around her like water around a stone, while her brain tried to process what had just happened. FBI investigation, money laundering, conspiracy to murder. The words felt abstract, like something from a television show rather than her actual life. But Agent Chen had sounded very real, had known where Vivian stayed last night, had known about the money transfer, which meant someone was watching. Someone had been watching the whole time. Her phone buzzed again, email notification. She opened it with shaking fingers. From Chen, Sarah, FBI. Subject, follow-up conversation. Miss Hale, as discussed, I'm available for a voluntary interview at your earliest convenience. I'm staying at the Hotel Bristol through Sunday. You can reach me at this email or the number below. I understand this situation is confusing and frightening, but I want to be clear about something. Kyle Moretti is not the person he's pretending to be. His organization has been linked to at least 7 murders in the past 3 years, including the death of his associate Marco Venturi in Milan. We believe Mr. Moretti ordered retaliatory killings following that incident. We believe he's currently planning additional violence against rival organizations. Whatever you think you know about him is a carefully constructed lie. Whatever he told you about himself is manipulation designed to create loyalty. You seem like a good person caught in a bad situation. Don't let misplaced loyalty destroy your life. Think about your brother. Think about what happens to him if you end up facing federal charges. Make the smart choice. S.A. Sarah Chen, FBI Transnational Organized Crime plus 331XXX20. Vivian read the email 3 times, her hands trembling. Marco Venturi. Retaliatory killings. 7 murders. Kyle had told her he'd killed people, but hearing it described in federal documentation made it concrete in a way conversation hadn't. Made it real. She thought about last night, about the way he'd kissed her, about the vulnerability in his voice when he talked about feeling human again. Had any of it been real? Or had Agent Chen been right about manipulation? Vivienne shoved her phone back in her pocket and started walking, no destination in mind, just desperate to move. She walked for an hour through streets she didn't recognize, past shops she didn't see, while her thoughts spiraled. She could cooperate with the FBI, tell them everything, go home and pretend Paris never happened. Or she could ignore Agent Chen, trust KL, believe that whatever he'd done, he was still the man who'd wrapped a blanket around her on the plane, who'd taken her to Margot's restaurant, who'd looked at her like she was salvation instead of complication. Both options felt impossible. She ended up at a small park, where old men played chess at concrete tables and mothers watched children climb rusted playground equipment. Vivienne sat on a bench, pulled out her phone, and stared at Agent Chen's email. Think about your brother. That's what it came down to. Not her feelings. Not her attraction to a dangerous man who made her feel alive. Just Marcus. Just the 17-year-old kid who'd already lost both parents and couldn't afford to lose his sister too. She was about to dial Agent Chen's number when someone sat down on the bench beside her. Vivienne looked up. The woman was mid-30s, dark hair, expensive clothes that managed to look casual and calculated simultaneously. Her smile was warm, friendly, completely at odds with the coldness in her eyes. "Vivian Hale," the woman said. "You're harder to track down than expected. Who are you? A friend? Or maybe an enemy? Depends on how this conversation goes." The woman crossed her legs, settling in like they had all day. "My name is Isabelle Laurent. I believe you've been accidentally living my life for the past 2 days." Understanding crashed over Vivian like a wave. "You're the woman who was supposed to be on the plane." "Exactly. And I'm very curious why Kyle let you stay after discovering the mistake." Isabel's eyes traveled over Vivian with clinical assessment. "You're pretty enough, I suppose, but not his usual type. So what made you special?" "I don't know what you're talking about. Please, don't insult my intelligence. You spent the night at his residence. You're still in Paris instead of on a plane home, and Kyle Moretti doesn't keep civilians around unless they're useful." Isabel leaned closer. "So I'll ask again. What made you useful?" Vivian's skin crawled. "I should go." "Stay. This conversation benefits you more than me." Isabel pulled out her phone, scrolled through something, then turned the screen toward Vivian. The photograph showed Kyle and Isabel together at some formal event, his arm around her waist, her hand on his chest. Both of them looking at the camera with the practiced ease of people who'd done this 1,000 times. "That was taken 3 weeks ago," Isabel said. "Charity gala in Monaco. We've been together for 6 months. Business and pleasure, as they say." Vivian's stomach turned. "He didn't mention you." "I'm sure he didn't. That's Kyle's specialty. Making people feel special. Making them believe they're different from everyone else who came before." Isabel's smile sharpened. "But you're not different. You're just convenient. A distraction while he handles some unpleasant business in Paris." "You're lying." "Am I?" "Call him. Right now. Ask him about me. See what he says." Isabel stood, smoothing her skirt. "Or don't. Keep believing you're special. Keep thinking last night meant something. Just don't be surprised when he discards you the moment you stop being useful." She walked away before Vivian could respond, disappearing into the park crowd like she'd never been there. Vivian sat frozen on the bench, Isabel's words circling through her mind like poison. She pulled out her phone, stared at Kael's contact information, and tried to decide if calling him would give her answers or just more lies. Before she could choose, a text message arrived. Unknown number. You're being played. Moretti is using you as bait to draw out his enemies. Get away from him while you still can. Vivienne's hand shook so badly, she almost dropped the phone. She looked around the park, suddenly paranoid that everyone was watching, that federal agents and mafia enforcers and whoever else was circling this disaster were all closing in simultaneously. She stood and started walking, faster now, cutting through side streets and narrow alleys, trying to lose anyone who might be following. Her breath came short and sharp. Her chest felt tight. Everything Kael had warned her about was happening exactly the way he'd described. Federal investigation, rival families, people getting hurt by association. And underneath it all, the horrible question, had any of it been real? Or had she been so desperate for connection that she'd fallen for the oldest trick in the book, a charming man with secrets who made her feel seen? She reached the hotel 20 minutes later, her legs shaking, her mind spinning. The silver-haired man looked up as she burst through the door. "Is he here?" she demanded. "Mr. Moretti is not currently... Is he here?" "Third floor, the office. But I don't recommend..." Vivienne was already moving, taking the stairs two at a time, her exhaustion forgotten beneath the surge of adrenaline and anger and fear. She reached the third floor and found the office door closed. Voices inside. Kael's and at least two others. She didn't knock, just pushed the door open. Kael stood near the window, phone pressed to his ear, still mid-conversation. Two men in suits sat at a conference table, documents spread between them. Everyone turned to look at Vivienne standing in the doorway, breathing hard, probably looking half crazy. "I'll call you back," Kael said into the phone. He hung up, his expression shifting from surprised to concerned. "Vivienne, what's wrong? Is Isabelle Laurent your girlfriend?" The question landed like a grenade. The two men at the table exchanged glances. Kael's jaw tightened. "Everyone out," he said quietly. "Kael, we're in the middle of... Out, now!" The men gathered their documents and left, closing the door behind them. Silence filled the office, thick and suffocating. Kael moved away from the window, stopping a few feet from Vivienne. "Where did you hear that name?" he asked carefully. "She found me. Showed me pictures of you two together. Told me you've been together for 6 months. And you believed her?" "I don't know what to believe. I also got a call from an FBI agent telling me you're under federal investigation for 7 murders. And I got a text from someone saying you're using me as bait." Vivienne's voice cracked. "So you tell me, Kael, what am I supposed to believe?" He closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them, she saw resignation there. "Isabelle is a business associate, nothing more. The relationship she's describing doesn't exist." "Then why would she claim it does?" "Because she's trying to destabilize me, make me vulnerable. It's what people in my world do when they want leverage." And the FBI investigation. "Real. I told you I was a criminal. Did you think that was metaphorical?" "And the 7 murders?" Kael's expression went completely flat. "I don't discuss numbers with anyone, not even you." The non-answer was answer enough. Vivienne felt something crack inside her chest. "You used me. Everything you said, everything we did, you were just using me." "No." "Then explain the text. Explain why someone thinks I'm bait. Because in my world, everyone's looking for weakness. And you..." He stopped, jaw working. "You became a weakness the moment I let you stay. So it's my fault?" "It's nobody's fault. It's just reality." Kael moved closer, and Vivienne saw genuine anguish in his eyes. "I told you to leave. I told you staying was dangerous. But you wouldn't listen, and I was selfish enough to let you stay anyway. Because you wanted to feel human. Yes. By using me as an experiment? As therapy for your guilt? No." Jesus, Vivienne, no. His hands flexed at his sides like he wanted to reach for her but knew better. "Last night was real. Everything I told you was real, but real doesn't change the fact that my enemies now know you exist, and they'll use that against me however they can, including killing me." The silence that followed was confirmation enough. Vivienne backed toward the door, her whole body shaking. "I need to go home." "Agreed. I'll have my driver." No, no more drivers, no more money transfers, no more anything connected to you. She pulled the door open. I'll get to the airport myself. I'll buy my own ticket, and after today we never contact each other again. Vivian, was Isabel telling the truth? About you being together? Kyle held her gaze. We slept together twice. 6 months ago. It meant nothing then and means nothing now. She's trying to manipulate you. Everyone's trying to manipulate me, including you. That's not fair. Fair? Vivian's voice rose. You pulled me into a world where federal agents threaten me and strangers send anonymous warnings and ex-girlfriends track me down to deliver psychological warfare. You don't get to talk to me about fair. She turned to leave, but Kael's voice stopped her one final time. I'm sorry. Vivian looked back at him standing in the middle of that expensive office, and for a moment she saw past the criminal to the broken man underneath, the one who'd lost his best friend and spent 3 months drowning in grief, the one who'd looked at her like she was salvation. But salvation didn't make her bulletproof, didn't make her safe, didn't make any of this less catastrophically stupid. So am I, she said. Then she walked out, leaving him alone with his empire and his enemies and his carefully constructed lies. Pakak. Vivian made it back to her suite before the shaking turned into full-body tremors. She collapsed onto the bed, her breath coming in gasps, while her brain tried to process everything that had exploded in the past 2 hours. FBI investigation, 7 murders, Isabelle Laurent, anonymous warnings. Real doesn't change the fact that my enemies now know you exist. She thought about Marcus alone in New Jersey, about what happened if Kael's enemies decided the best way to hurt him was through her brother. Her phone buzzed, text message from a number she didn't recognize. Unknown, car waiting outside. Airport, now, don't argue. She should refuse, should delete the message and figure out her own transportation, but exhaustion and fear won over pride. She grabbed her jacket, left the borrowed clothes folded on the bed, and walked out of the suite without looking back. The car was a nondescript sedan, driver sitting behind tinted windows. He didn't speak when she climbed in, just pulled into traffic and drove. Vivian stared out the window watching Paris disappear and felt nothing except numb. The city that had felt like possibility yesterday now felt like a trap she'd barely escaped. They were halfway to the airport when the driver's phone rang. He answered in French, listened, and then his eyes met hers in the rearview mirror. Change of plans, mademoiselle. What? Mr. Moretti requests you return to the hotel. He says it's urgent. Tell Mr. Moretti I don't take requests from him anymore. The driver's expression didn't change. He said you would say that. He also said to tell you it concerns your brother. Vivian's blood turned to ice. What about my brother? He didn't provide details, only said it was urgent you return immediately. Every instinct screamed trap, screamed manipulation, screamed that this was exactly the kind of emotional leverage Kael would use to keep control. But if there was even a chance Marcus was in danger, turn around, she said. The driver did a U-turn that violated at least 3 traffic laws and headed back toward the city. Vivian pulled out her phone and called Marcus. It went straight to voicemail. She called again. Same result. She tried the neighbor who sometimes checked on him. No answer. Panic clawed at her throat. The drive back felt longer than the drive out. Every red light was torture. Every slow-moving vehicle was an obstacle she wanted to ram through. By the time they pulled up to the hotel, Vivian was already opening the door before the car fully stopped. She ran inside, past the silver-haired man's startled greeting, up the stairs toward the 3rd-floor office where she'd left Kael 20 minutes ago. The door was open. Inside, Kael stood with his phone pressed to his ear, his expression darker than she'd ever seen it. He saw her and ended the call immediately. What happened to Marcus? She demanded. He's fine. He's at home. But there was an incident. What kind of incident? Kael gestured to a laptop open on the desk. Security footage played on the screen, grainy black and white showing the exterior of Vivian's apartment building. She watched herself leave for work yesterday morning, watched Marcus come home from school, watched hours compress into seconds. Then, around 9 p.m., 2 men appeared, dark clothes, faces partially obscured. They approached the building entrance, and one of them pulled something from his jacket. Vivian's breath stopped, but they didn't go inside. Just stood there for 3 minutes, clearly visible to any security camera, clearly wanting to be seen. Then they left. The footage continued. Marcus leaving for school this morning, a different car pulling up 30 seconds after he turned the corner, following. They didn't touch him, Kyle said quietly. They didn't approach. They just made sure we knew they could. Vivian's legs gave out. She caught herself against the desk, her whole body shaking. Who? Rival organization. The same people who killed Marco. They've been watching you since you arrived in Paris, tracking your movements, building a profile. His voice was hollow. And now they know exactly how to hurt me. By going after my brother. Yes. Because I stayed. Because I was stupid enough to think one night with you was worth it. Vivian, don't! She straightened, fury replacing fear. Don't apologize. Don't explain. Just tell me how to fix this. Cale looked at her for a long moment, and she saw genuine pain in his eyes. You can't. Not from New Jersey. They'll keep circling Marcus, keep making their presence known, keep escalating until either I give them what they want or... He trailed off. Or what? Or they take him, use him as leverage, force me to choose between protecting my organization and protecting you. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. What do they want? Vivian asked. Territory? Shipments? Things I won't give them. Then give them the things. It's not that simple. If I surrender territory, I look weak. Other organizations will sense blood in the water. The empire Marco and I built will collapse within months. Kale's jaw clenched. But if I don't surrender, they'll keep targeting you, your brother, everyone you care about, until I break. So those are my options? Your empire survives and Marcus dies? Or your empire collapses and we're still not safe because now every other organization knows we're the weak point? There's a third option. Something in his tone made Vivian's skin crawl. What? You stay, both of you. Marcus comes to Paris under protection, lives here where my security can cover him 24 hours a day. You stay with me, become part of the organization instead of adjacent to it. That's insane. That's survival. Kyle moved closer. My enemies already know you're connected to me. That bell can't be unrung. So you either stay where I can protect you, or you go home and spend every day wondering when they'll decide warnings aren't enough. Vivian's mind raced. You're asking me to give up my entire life, my job, my home, everything. I'm asking you to stay alive. There's a difference. And Marcus? You expect a 17-year-old to drop out of high school and move to Paris because his sister slept with a mafia boss? I expect a 17-year-old to prefer living in Paris over getting kidnapped in New Jersey. The brutal logic was undeniable. Vivian hated that it was undeniable. How long? She asked. What? How long would we need to stay? A month? A year? Forever? Cale's expression told her the answer before he spoke. Until the situation stabilizes. Until my enemies stop seeing you as leverage. Until never. You're saying never. I'm saying I don't know. Could be 6 months. Could be longer. Could be the rest of our lives. He didn't deny it. Vivian walked to the window, staring out at Paris stretching into the distance. 48 hours ago, she'd been exhausted but stable, poor but managing, surviving. Now she was trapped between impossible choices, all because she'd taken a wrong turn in an airport and ended up on a plane with a man whose world devoured everything it touched. I need to call Marcus, she said finally. Use my phone. It's secure. She took it, dialed her brother's number with shaking fingers. This time he answered immediately. Viv? Jesus, where are you? I've been calling. I know. I'm sorry. Are you okay? Am I okay? You're the one who disappeared to Paris. I'm fine. Worried, but fine. Vivian's throat tightened. Marcus, something's happened, something complicated, and I need you to listen without interrupting, okay? Silence. Then, you're scaring me. I know, but I need you to trust me. She took a deep breath. How fast can you pack? Marcus arrived in Paris 36 hours later, looking like he'd aged 5 years overnight. His backpack hung from one shoulder, his eyes were red-rimmed from exhaustion or crying or both, and when he saw Vivian waiting at the private terminal, his face crumpled with relief and fury simultaneously. What the hell is happening? He demanded, dropping the bag and crossing the distance between them in 3 strides. You call me saying pack everything, Some guy shows up with a plane ticket and 2 bodyguards, and now I'm in France and you look like... He stopped, taking in her appearance properly. Jesus, Viv, what happened to you? Vivian pulled him into a hug before he could finish cataloging the damage. She knew what she looked like. 2 days of barely sleeping, eyes hollow from stress, wearing borrowed clothes that didn't quite fit. But seeing Marcus solid and real and safe made something unclench in her chest. I'm sorry, she said into his shoulder. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. That's not an explanation. I know. A throat cleared behind them. Vivian turned to find one of Kael's security team, broad-shouldered man named Claude, who'd barely spoken 10 words since being assigned to them, standing at a respectful distance. The car is ready, Claude said in accented English. Mr. Moretti is waiting. Marcus pulled back from the hug, his expression shifting from relieved to suspicious in half a second. Who's Mr. Moretti? That's, complicated. Stop saying that. Stop saying everything's complicated and just tell me what's going on. Vivian glanced at Claude, who maintained his professional neutrality, then back at Marcus. I will. In the car. I promise. The drive from the airport took 40 minutes through morning Paris traffic. Marcus sat rigid beside her in the back seat, arms crossed, radiating anger barely contained beneath worry. Claude drove in silence, and Vivian tried 3 times to start explaining before her throat closed up, and the words wouldn't come. Finally, Marcus broke first. Are you in trouble with the law? No, not exactly. Are you sick? No. Did someone hurt you? Not physically. Then what? His voice cracked. Because 2 days ago you were working double shifts at Mount Sinai, and now you're in Paris with bodyguards, and I'm here instead of in calculus class, and you won't look at me when you talk. So just tell me what's happening before I lose my mind. Vivian forced herself to meet his eyes. I met someone. A man. It was an accident. Wrong place, wrong time. And he's not a good person, Marcus. He's involved in things that are dangerous and illegal, and I should have walked away the moment I realized what he was. But I didn't, and now his enemies know about us, about you, and they're threatening to hurt you to get to him. Marcus stared at her like she'd started speaking a foreign language. His enemies? Like what? Business rivals? Like organized crime? Mafia? The kind of people who don't make empty threats? Jesus Christ. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, the gesture so familiar it hurt. Their father used to do the same thing when stressed. Are you insane? How do you accidentally get involved with the Mafia? I told you, wrong place, wrong time. I took a wrong turn at the airport and ended up on his private plane and you stayed? You could have left and you stayed? It's more complicated than that. Stop saying complicated. Marcus's voice rose enough that Claude glanced in the rearview mirror. Either you're in danger or you're not. Either I'm in danger or I'm not. Which is it? Both. Vivian's voice came out barely above a whisper. We're both in danger, and the only way to keep you safe is to keep you here where Kael's security can protect you. Kael, Marcus said the name like it tasted bad. That's Mr. Moretti, the guy you met? Yes. And you slept with him. It wasn't a question. Vivian's silence confirmed it anyway. Unbelievable. Marcus turned to stare out the window. Mom and Dad die and leave me with one person. One. And you decide to throw that away for some criminal you just met. I didn't throw anything away. I'm trying to protect you. By dragging me to another country? By pulling me out of school? By... He stopped, jaw clenched. What about college? What about the scholarships? What about everything we've been working toward for 2 years? I don't know. I don't have answers yet. I'm just trying to keep you alive long enough to figure it out. The rest of the drive passed in suffocating silence. They arrived at a different building than the hotel where Vivian had been staying. Modern apartment tower in the 7th arrondissement, all glass and steel and the kind of anonymous luxury designed for people who needed to disappear. Claude led them through a private entrance, up an elevator that required a key card, to the top floor where a 2-bedroom suite waited. Mr. Moretti will arrive within the hour, Claude said. If you need anything before then, use the phone in the kitchen. Someone will answer. He left, and Vivian heard the soft click of the door locking from the outside. Marcus noticed, too. Are we prisoners? We're protected. Same thing. He dropped his backpack and moved through the apartment like a caged animal, checking windows that didn't open, testing the door that wouldn't budge, examining every corner like he might find an escape route hidden behind expensive furniture. "This is insane," he muttered. "This whole thing is insane." Vivian sank onto the couch, exhaustion crashing over her. "I know. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you met some guy and suddenly we're in witness protection, except we're not witnesses, we're just collateral damage. That's not fair." "Fair?" Marcus spun to face her. "You want to talk about fair? Fair is going to school. Fair is applying to colleges. Fair is having a normal senior year instead of hiding from the mob in Paris." His voice broke. "I've already lost Mom and Dad. I can't lose you too." "You're not going to lose me. You don't know that. You don't know anything about what happens next." He crossed his arms again, defensive posture that screamed vulnerability underneath. "I want to meet him." "What?" "This Kyle guy, the one who destroyed our lives in 48 hours. I want to meet him face to face." "Marcus, I'm not asking. Either I meet him or I'm walking out that door and taking my chances back home." "You can't. They'll..." "I know what they'll do. You've made that very clear." His expression hardened in a way that reminded Vivian of their father during the worst fights with their mother, stubborn beyond reason. "But if I'm staying here, if I'm giving up everything because of your mistake, then I deserve to know who's worth it." Before Vivian could respond, the lock clicked. The door opened, and Kyle walked in looking like he'd aged a decade since she'd seen him 2 days ago. He stopped when he saw Marcus, and something flickered across his expression. Recognition of damage done, or maybe just calculation about how to handle a complication. "You must be Marcus," he said, "and you must be the asshole who ruined my sister's life." Kale's mouth twitched towards something that wasn't quite a smile. "That's accurate." "Marcus," Vivian started. "Vivian, no." Marcus cut her off, moving closer to Kale with the kind of reckless bravery that came from being 17 and scared and furious. "You don't get to smooth this over with money or apologies or whatever rich criminals do. You pulled her into your world. You made us targets. So you're going to stand there and explain why we should trust you to keep us alive when you're the reason we're in danger in the first place." Kale held Marcus's glare without flinching. "You shouldn't trust me. Trust is earned, and I haven't earned anything from either of you. But your sister is right about one thing. Staying here is safer than going back to New Jersey. My enemies know where you live, they know your schedule, and they're patient enough to wait for the perfect moment to use you against me. Why? What did you do to them?" "I exist. In my world, that's enough." Kale moved past Marcus toward the kitchen, poured himself water from the tap like he'd done it 1,000 times. 3 months ago, they killed my best friend during negotiations that went wrong. I responded by destroying 3 of their operations and making it clear I wouldn't negotiate anymore. They've been looking for leverage ever since. Your sister provided it by accident." "By accident?" Marcus's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Right. Because she accidentally stayed in Paris. Accidentally slept with you. Accidentally fell for whatever line you fed her." "Marcus, stop," Vivian said. "Why should I? He's a criminal. He admitted it. Everything bad that's happening is because of him." "It's because of me." Vivian stood, moving between them. "I made the choice to stay. I made the choice to trust him. If you're angry at someone, be angry at me. I am angry at you, but I'm also angry at him for putting you in a position to make those choices." Marcus looked past her at Kyle. "You knew she was a civilian. You knew getting involved with her would make her a target. And you did it anyway because you wanted something and you're used to taking whatever you want." The accusation hung in the air, brutal in its accuracy. Kale set down the water glass with careful precision. "You're right," he said. "About all of it. I knew better and I did it anyway because I was selfish and tired and your sister made me feel human for the first time in months. That's not an excuse, it's just the truth." "So what now? We stay here forever? I give up my entire future because you couldn't control yourself?" "No. You stay here until the situation is resolved. Then you go home, go to college, live whatever life you choose." "And how long until it's resolved?" Kale's expression darkened. "I'm working on it." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have right now." Marcus turned to Vivian, and she saw betrayal written across his face. "This is what you chose?" This guy who can't even promise us basic safety? I chose to keep you alive, Vivian said. Everything else is secondary. No, everything else is our lives, our future, and you traded it for, he gestured at Kyle, for him. I traded it for time. Time to figure out a solution that doesn't end with you dead in an alley somewhere. Maybe I'd rather take that risk than live like this. The words hit like a physical blow. Vivian opened her mouth to respond, but her throat closed up, because part of her wondered if he was right, if she'd made the wrong choice, if she'd been so busy trying to protect him that she'd destroyed the life they'd spent 2 years building together. Cale's phone buzzed, shattering the moment. He answered it immediately, moving toward the windows while speaking in rapid Italian that Vivian was starting to recognize as his crisis mode. When he hung up, his expression was grim. "We have a problem," he said. "Another one?" Marcus's voice was bitter. Kale ignored him, focusing on Vivian. "The rival organization knows Marcus is here. They tracked his flight, which means they know I'm protecting you both, which means they're going to escalate." "How?" Vivian asked. "I don't know yet, but they'll move soon, next 24 hours probably. Then we move first. We go somewhere else, somewhere they can't track." "There is nowhere they can't track, not with the resources they have." Kyle's jaw clenched. "But there's another option." "Which is?" "I meet with them. Negotiate a truce. Give them something they want in exchange for leaving you alone." "You said you wouldn't negotiate anymore." "I said I wouldn't negotiate over Marco's death. This is different." "Is it?" Vivian moved closer. "Because it sounds like you're giving up territory or power or whatever else they want, which makes you look weak, which makes other organizations sense blood in the water. You said it yourself." "I did. And I meant it. But that was before I had something worth compromising for." His eyes met hers, and Vivian saw the truth there. The fear he'd been hiding behind strategy. He was terrified of losing her, of losing Marcus, of failing to protect them the way he'd failed to protect Marco. "When?" she asked. "Tonight, midnight, neutral territory." "And if they don't want to negotiate? If they want blood instead of compromise?" Kale's expression went cold. "Then I give them blood, just not yours." Bumcheti. The hours before midnight stretched like torture. Kale disappeared to coordinate security and backup plans. Marcus locked himself in one of the bedrooms and refused to come out. And Vivian paced the apartment like a ghost, her mind spinning through every possible outcome. Around 8 p.m., her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, then thought of Agent Chen and the FBI investigation that was still circling somewhere in the background of this disaster. "Hello? Miss Hale." A man's voice this time, older, Italian accent. "My name is Dante Coretti. I believe you know who I am." Vivian's blood turned to ice. "You're the one threatening my brother." Threatening is such an ugly word. I prefer creating incentive. But yes, essentially correct. He sounded almost amused. "I'm calling because I want you to understand something important about tonight's meeting." "What?" "Kale Moretti cannot win. Whatever he offers, whatever he promises, the mathematics of this situation are very simple. He has something I want, territory, connections, reputation, and he has something he values even more than those things. You, your brother, his weakness." A pause. "I could take the things I want by force, wage war, lose men, spend resources. Or I could simply take you, use you to force his surrender, much more efficient. If you touch my brother, I won't touch him, not if you're smart." Coretti's voice hardened. "Here's what's going to happen. Tonight, you will convince Kyle to accept my terms. Whatever I ask for, he gives. Whatever compromise I propose, he agrees. And in exchange, I leave you both alone. And if he doesn't agree, then tomorrow morning your brother disappears, not killed, just disappeared. And every day Kyle refuses to cooperate, we send you pieces of him, fingers first, then toes, then—" "Stop!" Vivian's voice shook. "Just stop." "Then you understand the stakes. Convince him, Miss Hale, or live with the consequences." The call ended. Vivian stood frozen in the middle of the apartment, the phone trembling in her hand while Coretti's words echoed through her skull. Convince him, or live with the consequences. The bedroom door opened. Marcus emerged looking pale and exhausted. Who was that? He asked. Nobody. Don't lie to me. Not now. He crossed the room. Was it them? The people threatening us? Vivian nodded, not trusting her voice. What did they say? They want me to convince Kyle to surrender, give them whatever they're asking for. And if he doesn't? They'll hurt you, kill you eventually, but hurt you first to make a point. Marcus absorbed this with the kind of numb acceptance that came from too much bad news in too short a time. So we're screwed either way. Either Kyle gives up everything and we spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders, or he doesn't, and I die. There has to be another option. There's not. We both know there's not. He moved to the window, staring out at Paris glittering in the darkness below. I keep thinking about Mom and Dad, about how they died because some drunk asshole decided to get behind a wheel, random, meaningless. And now I might die because you took a wrong turn in an airport and met the wrong person. Also random, also meaningless. Don't talk like that. Why not? It's true. He turned to face her. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just tired and scared, and I want this to be over. Vivian crossed the room and pulled him into a hug. He resisted for half a second, then collapsed against her the way he used to when he was younger and the world felt too big and scary. I won't let them hurt you, she whispered. I promise. You can't promise that. I can try. The door opened again. Kyle entered, followed by 3 men in tactical gear who looked like they'd trained for exactly this kind of situation. He stopped when he saw Vivian and Marcus embracing, and something pained crossed his expression. We need to go, he said quietly. Meeting's in 90 minutes. Travel time is 45. That gives us time to prep. I'm coming, Vivian said. No. I wasn't asking. She pulled back from Marcus. If this is about me, then I should be there. It's too dangerous. Everything about this is dangerous. But I'm not letting you negotiate my life without me present. Kale looked like he wanted to argue, then nodded once. Fine, but you follow every instruction I give. No arguments, no improvisation. Understood? Understood. He turned to one of the tactical team members. Vincent stays here with the kid, full lockdown protocol, nobody in or out until we return. Marcus bristled at being called the kid, but didn't argue. He just looked at Vivian with eyes that said everything his voice wouldn't. Be careful, come back. Don't make this the last time we see each other. I'll be back, she promised. Then she followed Kyle out into the Paris night, toward a meeting that would either end the nightmare or make it permanent. Bashek. The location was an abandoned warehouse in an industrial district that looked like it hadn't seen legitimate business in decades. Graffiti covered the walls. Broken windows leaked cold October air. The kind of place where people went to disappear. 2 black SUVs were already parked outside when they arrived. Coretti's people. Kyle's security did a perimeter sweep before giving the all clear. Then they entered through a side door that groaned on rusted hinges. Inside, the warehouse was mostly empty, except for a single table set up under a flickering overhead light. Dante Coretti sat on one side, flanked by 4 men who looked like they'd been born with guns in their hands. He was older than Vivian expected. 60s, maybe? Silver hair, expensive suit that looked wrong in the decaying surroundings. Kyle, he smiled without warmth. And you brought the girl. How sentimental. Let's skip the small talk, Kyle said, moving to stand across from him. You wanted this meeting. State your terms. Direct. I appreciate that. Coretti gestured to the empty chairs. Sit. This won't be quick. Kale remained standing. So did Vivian, staying slightly behind him, hyper-aware of the security team positioned around the warehouse. Watching. Waiting. 3 months ago, Coretti began, you destroyed operations that took me years to build, cost me millions in revenue and dozens of valuable connections, all because you were angry about Marco's death. All because you killed my best friend during negotiations we both agreed would be peaceful. A regrettable miscalculation by an overeager lieutenant who's since been dealt with. But the damage was done, and you responded with disproportionate violence that made me look weak to my allies. Coretti's smile sharpened. I can't allow that to stand. So what do you want? Territory? Operations? Money? All of the above. But more importantly, I want you gone from the Eastern European market entirely. All shipping routes, all connections, all influence. You withdraw completely. That's 30% of my organization. Yes, and it's the price for peace. Coretti glanced at Vivian. Or more specifically, it's the price for her safety and her brother's. And if I refuse, then I take them anyway, except slowly, painfully. And when I'm done, I still take your Eastern European operations because you'll be too broken to fight back. Kael's hands clenched at his sides. You're asking me to surrender what took me 15 years to build. I'm asking you to choose power or love, empire or humanity. Marco chose the empire and died for it. What will you choose? The question hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. Vivian saw the calculation happening behind Kael's eyes, saw him weighing options, measuring angles, trying to find a path that didn't end in surrender or bloodshed. I need to think about it, he said finally. No. Coretti's voice hardened. You decide now. Accept my terms, or she dies right here. One of his men moved, pulling a gun with practiced ease and aiming it directly at Vivian's chest. She froze, her breath stopping, while time seemed to stretch and distort. Kael moved before she could process what was happening. 1 second he was standing still, the next his weapon was out and aimed at Coretti's head, while his security team mirrored the movement toward the other gunmen. Mexican standoff. Everyone armed. Everyone one trigger pull from chaos. Lower the gun, Kael said quietly. Now. Or what? You shoot me? My men shoot her? Everyone dies? Coretti looked almost bored. That's not negotiation, Kael. That's suicide. Lower. The gun. Accept my terms first. The warehouse was silent except for the sound of everyone breathing too hard. Vivian's heart hammered against her ribs. The gun barrel looked enormous, black and empty, and pointed directly at her center mass. She thought about Marcus alone in the apartment, about never seeing him again, about this being how her story ended, shot in a Paris warehouse over territory disputes she didn't understand. Kael, she said softly. Don't. His voice was steel. Don't say anything. Just listen. I said don't. But his weapon trembled slightly. The first crack in his control. Coretti saw it too. You're going to lose her, Kael. One way or another, you're going to lose her, because you can't protect everyone. You can't be everywhere at once. And the moment you show weakness, every organization from here to Moscow will come for you. He leaned forward. So choose. Empire or girl? Power or love? Make the choice Marco never got to make. Something changed in Kael's expression. Something cold and terrible sliding into place behind his eyes. Vivian recognized it from the hotel room where he'd fought his own people. Recognized the moment the Mafia boss eclipsed the man. You're right, he said. I can't protect everyone. Can't be everywhere at once. Can't show weakness. He shifted his aim slightly and shot one of Coretti's gunmen in the shoulder. The warehouse exploded into chaos. Gunfire erupted from 3 directions simultaneously. Vivian hit the ground as someone, Kael probably, shoved her behind a concrete pillar. More shots. Glass shattering. Men shouting in Italian and English and French all tangled together. She covered her head with her arms, pressed against the pillar while the world tore itself apart around her. Through the noise, she heard Kael's voice giving orders, heard screaming, heard the wet sound of bullets hitting flesh instead of concrete. It lasted maybe 30 seconds. Felt like hours. Then silence, broken only by someone's harsh breathing and the drip of something liquid hitting the floor. Vivian looked up. Kael stood in the center of the warehouse, weapons still raised, blood spattered across his shirt. Coretti was on the ground, clutching his leg where a bullet had torn through. 2 of his men were dead. The other 2 had their hands raised in surrender while Kael's security held them at gunpoint. You were saying? Kael's voice was completely flat. About choosing between empire and love? Coretti's face was twisted with pain and fury. You're dead. You understand that? You just started a war you can't win. Maybe. But you're going to call off your people targeting Vivian and her brother. You're going to spread the word that they're untouchable. And you're going to withdraw from every operation that competes with mine. Kael moved closer, pressing his boot against Coretti's wounded leg. The older man screamed. or I put the next bullet in your skull and let your organization collapse into chaos while everyone fights for scraps. You'll never survive the retaliation. I survived worse when I built this empire from nothing. I'll survive this too. He pressed harder. Call your people. Coretti's hand shook as he pulled out his phone, made the call, gave the orders in strangled Italian while blood pooled beneath him. When he finished, Kael stepped back. Get him out of here, he told his security team. Dump him at a hospital. Let him explain the gunshot wound however he wants. Then he turned to Vivian, still crouched behind the pillar, and his expression shifted from cold killer to something human again. Are you hurt? He asked. She shook her head, not trusting her voice. Can you walk? Another nod. He helped her to her feet, his hand gentle despite the violence it had just committed, and led her toward the exit. Behind them, his team was already cleaning up, removing shell casings, wiping surfaces, erasing evidence of what had happened here. Outside, the Paris night was cold and clear and completely indifferent to the blood spilled in its shadows. Kael guided Vivian to the SUV, helped her inside, then climbed in after her. Drive, he told the driver. Back to the apartment. Now! The vehicle pulled away from the warehouse, leaving the carnage behind, and Vivian sat in the leather seat trying to process what she'd just witnessed. The speed, the violence, the complete transformation of Kael from controlled negotiator to something far more dangerous. You started a war, she said finally. I ended one. His voice was hollow. Coretti was never going to negotiate. He wanted surrender or death, so I gave him option 3. Which is survival through fear. Now every organization knows what happens when they threaten you. They'll think twice before trying again. Or they'll see you as weak for protecting civilians, see us as leverage worth dying for. Maybe. Kael's jaw clenched. But I'd rather die protecting you than live knowing I let you get hurt because I was too afraid to fight. The words hit harder than the gunfire had. Vivian turned to look at him properly. This man who'd destroyed another man's operation for her, who'd risked everything he'd built, who'd chosen love over empire even though he'd never actually said the word. What happens now? She asked. Now I prepare for retaliation. Shore up defenses. Make sure you and Marcus are protected no matter what comes next. He finally looked at her, and his eyes were haunted. And I live with the fact that I just killed 2 men and crippled another because I couldn't walk away from you. Do you regret it? Killing them? No. They made their choice when they aimed a gun at your chest. He paused. But I regret that you had to see it. Had to see what I really am when someone threatens the things I care about. Vivian should have been horrified, should have been traumatized, should have been demanding he take her and Marcus to the airport right now so they could escape before the next wave of violence arrived. Instead, she reached across the seat and took his blood-stained hand in hers. I'm still here, she said quietly. Kael's fingers tightened around hers like she was the only thing keeping him anchored to humanity. You shouldn't be. I know, but I am. The SUV carried them through empty Paris streets while sirens wailed in the distance, heading toward the warehouse and the violence they'd left behind. And Vivian held the hand of a man who'd just committed murder for her, knowing that tomorrow would bring consequences neither of them could predict. But tomorrow wasn't here yet. Tonight, they were both still alive. And maybe, in Kael's world, that was the only victory that mattered. The retaliation came 3 days later, but not in the way anyone expected. Vivian woke to the sound of Kael's phone ringing at 4 a.m. She'd been sleeping in his bed since the warehouse, neither of them discussing it, just gravitating toward each other in the darkness like survivors of the same shipwreck. He answered on the second ring, his voice shifting from sleep to alert in half a second. When? A pause. How many? Another pause, longer this time. I'm on my way. He was already out of bed, pulling on clothes, his movements sharp and efficient. Vivian sat up, her heart hammering. What happened? Fire at one of my legitimate businesses. Hotel in the 8th. 4 stories fully engulfed. Fire department's calling it arson. His jaw clenched as he fastened his watch. Coretti's people. Has to be. Anyone hurt? 2 staff members hospitalized for smoke inhalation. Could have been worse. The building was mostly empty at this hour. He grabbed his jacket. Stay here. Don't leave the apartment. Vincent's outside if you need anything. Kael, But he was already gone, the door closing with finality that felt like a preview of something worse coming. Vivienne got out of bed and moved to the window. Dawn was still hours away, Paris sleeping beneath its blanket of electric lights. Somewhere out there, one of Kael's properties was burning. Somewhere out there, people were bleeding because of decisions made in a warehouse 3 nights ago. She thought about calling Marcus, then remembered he'd barely spoken to her since they returned from the meeting. He'd locked himself in his room, emerging only for meals, treating her with the kind of cold politeness that hurt worse than anger. Her phone buzzed, text message from an unknown number. Unknown. The hotel was a warning. Next time it won't be empty. Leave Paris while you still can. Vivienne's hands shook as she deleted the message. Then another arrived immediately. Unknown. He can't protect you forever. Eventually his attention will slip, and when it does, we'll be waiting. She turned off the phone and pressed her forehead against the cold window glass, trying to slow her racing heart. This was the life Kael had warned her about. The endless threats, the constant fear. The knowledge that safety was an illusion maintained only through violence and vigilance. She stood there until sunrise painted the sky gray and pink, until exhaustion made her eyes burn, until she heard the door open and Kael returned smelling like smoke and looking 10 years older than when he'd left. How bad? She asked. Total loss? Buildings destroyed? Insurance will cover reconstruction, but that's not the point. He moved past her toward the bathroom. The point is they're escalating, making it clear that shooting Coretti wasn't enough to end this. What's next? I don't know, but it'll be worse. He turned on the shower, then looked at her through the steam beginning to fill the room. You should leave. Take Marcus. Go back to New Jersey or somewhere else entirely. Disappear before this gets uglier. We tried that conversation already. I'm still here. That was before they started burning buildings. And tomorrow it'll be before they do something even worse. There's always going to be a reason to run, Kael. But running doesn't solve anything. It just postpones the inevitable. The inevitable being what? You getting killed because you're too stubborn to save yourself? The inevitable being me choosing to stand with someone instead of spending the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. Vivienne moved closer. I've already lost my parents. I've already spent 2 years barely surviving. If I walk away now, what do I have? The same life I had before, except now with the memory that I abandoned someone who needed me. I don't need you. I need you safe. Same thing. Kael closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them, she saw the exhaustion there. The weight of Marco's death still pressing down. The fear that he was failing again. That everyone he cared about ended up destroyed. I can't lose you, he said quietly. I won't survive it. Then don't lose me. Fight for this. Fight for us. Stop trying to push me away because you're afraid. I'm terrified. The confession came out raw. Every second you're near me, I'm calculating risks and angles and how many ways this could go wrong. It's exhausting. It's paralyzing, and I don't know how to turn it off. Vivienne reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the scar along his jaw she'd noticed that first night but never asked about. You don't turn it off. You just learn to live with it. Same way I learned to live with watching people die in the ICU. Same way Marcus is learning to live without our parents. You carry it and keep moving. And if carrying it gets you killed, then at least I was living instead of just surviving. The words settled between them like a vow neither of them had planned to make. Kael pulled her close, holding her like she might disappear if he let go, and they stood in the bathroom while steam from the forgotten shower turned the air thick and warm. Butko. The next attack came during breakfast. Vivienne was in the kitchen making coffee when the apartment's security system started blaring. Vincent burst through the door, weapon drawn, shouting orders she couldn't hear over the alarm. Kael appeared from his office, phone already pressed to his ear, his expression darker than she'd ever seen it. "Lock it down," he ordered. "Nobody in or out until we clear the building." Marcus emerged from his bedroom, pale and frightened. "What's happening?" "Bomb threat," Vincent said tersely. "Anonymous call to the building management. They're evacuating everyone except this floor." "Except this floor?" Vivienne's voice rose. "Why would we stay if there's a bomb?" "Because there isn't one." Kael was pulling up security footage on his tablet. "It's a distraction. They want us to evacuate, so we're exposed. Easier to target in the chaos." "How do you know there's no bomb?" Because if they wanted us dead from an explosion, they would have just done it. No warning, no call. He showed her the tablet screen, so multiple camera angles of the building exterior where police were setting up a perimeter. This is theater, designed to make us panic and move. So we just stay here and wait? We stay here and let them think their distraction worked. Kyle handed the tablet to Vincent. Pull up every camera we have in a 3-block radius. I want to know who's watching this building right now. The next 30 minutes passed in tense silence, while Vincent worked through camera feeds and Kyle coordinated with his security team scattered throughout the city. Marcus sat on the couch, arms wrapped around himself, looking younger than 17. Vivian stayed near the window, watching police evacuate the building below, wondering how many of those officers knew they were responding to a fake threat designed to flush out targets. Got something? Vincent said suddenly. Black van parked 2 blocks west, been there since 5 a.m. Driver's been watching this building through binoculars. Cale moved to look at the screen. Can you get a face? Working on it. Vincent zoomed in, enhanced the image, and Vivian saw someone's profile come into focus. Male. 30s. The kind of face that disappeared in crowds. Send it to Marco, Kyle said, referencing someone Vivian didn't know. Have him run it through our database. I want a name in 10 minutes. While Vincent worked, Kyle's phone rang again. He answered with growing frustration. What now? His expression changed as he listened. The color drained from his face. When? His voice was barely controlled. How many? A pause. Keep me updated. He hung up and looked at Vivian with something close to devastation. They hit your brother's school in New Jersey, he said. Someone called in a shooting threat. Building's on lockdown. Police are searching for a gunman who doesn't exist. Vivian's knees went weak. Marcus is here. They don't know that. They're sending a message, proving they can reach anywhere we care about anytime they want. This is insane. Marcus stood up, his voice shaking. They're terrorizing an entire school because of us? They're terrorizing an entire school because they want me to break, Kyle corrected. And it's working. The admission hung in the air. Vivian saw the exact moment Kyle's control started crumbling, saw the calculation giving way to something more human and more dangerous. I'm ending this, he said quietly. Today. How? Vivian asked. By giving them what they want. You're surrendering? I'm eliminating the problem. He was already moving toward his office, pulling out a secured laptop, typing commands faster than she could follow. Coretti thinks he's won because he's making our lives miserable. He thinks fear and chaos will force me to capitulate. But he's wrong about something important. What? Kyle looked up, and his eyes were empty of everything except cold purpose. He thinks I still care about the Empire, about territory and power and reputation, but I don't, not anymore. The only thing I care about is making sure you and Marcus survive this, which means I'm going to do what I should have done the night Marco died. Which is? Burn it all down. The next 6 hours were a masterclass in controlled destruction. Cale made calls to people Vivian had never heard of, speaking in code she didn't understand, dismantling pieces of his organization like someone pulling apart a machine to see how it worked. He transferred ownership of businesses, liquidated accounts, severed connections that had taken years to build. What are you doing? Vivian asked during a brief pause. Making myself irrelevant. If I don't have an empire, there's nothing to fight over. If there's nothing to fight over, there's no reason to target you. He was signing documents, sending encrypted files, moving money through channels that would take investigators years to untangle. Coretti wants my territory? He can have it. Every operation, every connection, everything Marco and I built. He'll just take it and still come after us for revenge. No, because I'm making it look like I'm being investigated by multiple international agencies. Financial crimes, money laundering, conspiracy, everything. Cale showed her fabricated documents that looked horrifyingly real. In 48 hours, every major criminal organization will know that touching me or anyone associated with me means inheriting a federal investigation that could destroy them too. That's insane, reckless, possibly suicidal. He smiled without humor. But it's the only play that gets you out of this alive. Marcus had been listening from the doorway. You're giving up everything, your entire life. My entire life was already over the moment Marco died. I've just been going through the motions since then. Kyle looked at him directly. But your life is just starting, and your sister's life deserves more than constantly looking over her shoulder. So yes, I'm giving up everything, because the alternative is watching you both get destroyed by a world that should have never touched you in the first place. And after? Marcus asked. After you've dismantled your empire and made everyone think you're toxic? What then? Then I disappear. Start over somewhere new. Become someone nobody's looking for. And us? Vivian's voice was barely above a whisper. Cale met her eyes, and she saw the answer before he spoke it. You go home. Live your lives. Forget this ever happened. I can't forget you. You will. Eventually, time and distance work miracles that way. That's not what I meant. I know what you meant. He turned back to his laptop. But it doesn't change reality. My world almost got you killed, got your brother traumatized, got an entire school locked down because someone wanted to hurt me. That's not love, Vivian. That's poison. Love doesn't exist without risk. This isn't risk. This is guaranteed destruction, and I won't be responsible for it anymore. The finality in his voice made arguing pointless. Vivian watched him work for another hour, systematically destroying everything he'd spent 15 years building, and understood what it cost him. Understood that this was his version of sacrifice, his way of protecting people he cared about, even if it meant losing them forever. By late afternoon, it was done. Cale's empire existed only in scattered pieces, transferred to shell companies and intermediaries who would finish the dissolution over the coming weeks. The fabricated investigation files were already circulating through criminal networks, spreading like a virus, making his name toxic to anyone who valued survival over vengeance. Coretti will hear about this within hours, Kyle said, closing the laptop with finality. When he does, he'll realize that coming after you costs more than it's worth. The fabricated investigation links him to me, which means targeting you puts him in federal crosshairs too. He'll back off. You can't be sure of that. I'm 90% sure. That's better odds than we had yesterday. And the other 10%? If he's stupid enough to ignore the warnings, then I handle him permanently. But I don't think he's that stupid. Vivian wanted to ask what handle him permanently meant, but decided she'd rather not know. Some questions didn't need answers. Marcus moved into the room, his expression conflicted. So that's it? We just go home and pretend none of this happened. That's it, Kyle confirmed. Vincent will drive you to the airport tomorrow morning. First-class tickets to Newark. By tomorrow night, you'll be back in your apartment like this was a very strange dream. And you? I'll be somewhere else, somewhere nobody's looking. Marcus studied Kyle for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression. Less anger, more understanding. You're not as bad as I thought you were. I'm worse. You just didn't see all of it. Maybe. But you gave up everything to keep us safe. That counts for something. It counts for survival, nothing more. But Marcus shook his head. No. It counts for caring about someone more than you care about yourself. That's not nothing. He left the room before Kyle could respond, leaving just Vivian and the man who'd destroyed his entire world to save hers. He's wrong, Kyle said quietly. Caring about you isn't noble. It's selfish. I did this because I can't live with your death on my conscience. That's not heroism. That's just emotional self-preservation. Call it whatever you want. It's still sacrifice. Sacrifice implies giving up something valuable. I gave up something that was already destroying me from the inside. He moved to the window, staring out at Paris one last time. Marco used to say the Empire would kill us eventually, that we'd built something too big and too violent to ever walk away from. I didn't believe him. Thought we were smarter than that. Thought we could control it. You couldn't have known. I knew. I just didn't care. Power is addictive. Makes you feel invincible right up until the moment it gets someone you love killed. His voice cracked slightly. I should have walked away years ago. Should have taken Marco's advice. Maybe he'd still be alive. Or maybe he'd be dead anyway. You can't rewrite the past, KL. You can only live with it. That's what terrifies me. Living with it. Knowing that every decision I made led to this moment. Led to you being threatened. To Marcus being scared. To buildings burning and schools being locked down. He turned to face her. How do you live with that? How do you wake up every morning knowing you're the reason people suffer? Vivienne thought about her parents, about the night shift she'd worked while they drove home alone. About 2 years of wondering if things would have been different if she'd been there. You forgive yourself, she said finally, not because you deserve forgiveness, but because refusing to forgive yourself means they win, means the guilt consumes you until there's nothing left except regret. I don't know if I can do that. Then let me help you. Let us... She stopped, correcting herself. Let me be part of whatever comes next. Don't push me away because you think I'm better off without you. You are better off without me. That's not your decision to make. Cale closed his eyes, and when he opened them, she saw surrender there. Not the kind that came from defeat, the kind that came from realizing some battles weren't worth winning. If you stay, he said carefully, everything changes. I won't have money or power or any of the things that made me useful. I'll just be someone trying to disappear, trying to build something normal from the wreckage. I don't want your money or power. I never did. Then what do you want? You. The real version. The one who's terrified and broken and trying to figure out how to be human again. She moved closer. I spent 2 years surviving instead of living. You made me remember the difference. So don't ask me to walk away from that just because it's hard. Hard is all I've known. At least this version of hard comes with someone who understands. Cale pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her like she was the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting beneath his feet. I don't deserve you. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. They stood there while Paris hummed outside, while the life he'd known dissolved into memory, while tomorrow waited with all its uncertainty and possibility. The flight home was surreal in its normalcy. Marcus sat across the aisle reading a book he'd picked up at the airport. Vivian stared out the window watching clouds scroll past, and Kyle sat beside her, dressed in clothes that looked deliberately average, his expensive watch and tailored suits left behind in Paris. He'd shaved his usual stubble, cut his hair shorter, done everything possible to look like someone forgettable, someone who wouldn't attract attention or recognition. The transformation was startling, from dangerous crime lord to just another tired businessman heading home. Where will you go? Vivian asked quietly. Oregon, maybe. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere I can blend in. He glanced at her. You? Back to New Jersey, back to the hospital. Marcus needs to finish high school. I need to work. Life doesn't stop just because we spent a week in Paris living someone else's nightmare. It doesn't have to be someone else's nightmare. It could be... He stopped, seemed to recalculate. I could come to New Jersey, find work, try to build something normal. In New Jersey. Why not? I've lived in worse places. You're a billionaire crime lord trying to disappear into New Jersey suburbs. That's not a plan. That's a fantasy. Then what do you suggest? Vivian had been thinking about this since they boarded, thinking about what happened next, how you integrated someone like Kyle into a normal life without exposing him or putting Marcus at risk. Take time, she said finally. Go to Oregon, settle in, figure out who you are when you're not running an empire, and in 6 months, if you still want something with me, we'll figure it out then. 6 months. It's not that long. It's an eternity when I just gave up everything to keep you safe. And I'm asking for 6 months to make sure this is real, that it's not just trauma bonding or adrenaline or two broken people clinging to each other because we're scared. She took his hand. If it's real, it survives 6 months of distance. If it's not, then we both dodged a bigger disaster down the road. Cale was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. 6 months. But I'm calling you. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. And if after 6 months I still want this, want you, then we figure out what normal looks like for two people who met on a plane and accidentally fell in love while his world was burning down. That's not a fairy tale ending. I don't want a fairy tale. I want something real, something earned. Vivian leaned her head against his shoulder. Fairy tales are for people who've never survived anything. We need something stronger than that. The plane descended toward Newark, carrying them back to reality, and Vivian felt the weight of the past week settling into memory. The fear and violence and impossible choices would fade eventually, become stories they told differently depending on who was listening. But the part where she'd chosen to stay when every instinct said run, that would remain. The part where Kyle had destroyed his empire to save her, that would remain. The part where they'd both found something human in the middle of chaos, that would remain. Everything else was just details. 6 months later, Vivian was finishing a night shift when her phone rang. Unknown number, Oregon area code. She stepped into the hallway, her heart hammering, and answered. "Hi," Kayel's voice said. Softer than she remembered, less dangerous. "Hi yourself. It's been 6 months. I know. I built a woodworking shop, make furniture. Sells pretty well at the local markets. It's quiet, boring. Everything I didn't know I needed." He paused. "But I miss you. Every single day, I miss you." Vivian smiled, leaning against the wall. "Marcus got into Princeton. Full ride. He's leaving in August." "That's incredible." "He's terrified, but excited. Says he wants to study international law so he can make sure people like you face consequences." "Smart kid. The smartest." She took a breath. "I've been thinking about Oregon." Yeah, there's a hospital in Portland that's been trying to recruit me. Trauma unit, good benefits. And it's only 2 hours from wherever you are." 2 hours is nothing. "I know." "So you're saying," "I'm saying if you still want this, if you still want us, then maybe it's time to stop being careful and start being brave." Silence. Then she heard him exhale, and it sounded like relief. "When can you get here?" he asked. 2 weeks. I need to give notice, help Marcus pack, say goodbye to people." 2 weeks. I can wait 2 weeks. And then? Then we figure out what normal looks like. Together. Vivian closed her eyes, picturing it. A small town in Oregon. A woodworking shop. A hospital where she could save lives without drowning in debt. And a man who'd given up an empire because she'd made him remember what being human felt like. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was something better, something real. "I'll see you in 2 weeks," she said. "I'll be waiting." The call ended and Vivian stood in the hospital hallway while her shift ended and morning light crept through the windows. Marcus would graduate in June, she'd move to Oregon in July, and Kyle would be there, building furniture and learning how to live without violence. It wasn't perfect, probably never would be. But perfect was overrated anyway. Survival was better, love was better. Choosing to fight for something instead of just enduring it was better. And maybe, Vivian thought as she headed toward the exit, that was the real ending all along. Not happiness, not resolution, just the choice to keep moving forward despite everything that tried to stop you. She pulled out her phone and texted Marcus. "Vivian. Hey, you awake?" Marcus. "Yeah, why?" Vivian. "Just wanted to say I'm proud of you, and I love you, and everything's going to be okay." Marcus. "You're being weird. What happened?" Vivian. "Nothing. Everything. I'll explain later. Get some sleep." Marcus. "Whatever. Love you too." Vivian smiled and stepped out into the New Jersey morning, where the air smelled like exhaust and possibilities, where her car waited in the employee lot, where life continued being complicated and difficult and worth fighting for. Somewhere in Oregon, a man was building furniture and learning how to live without an empire. Somewhere in Paris, a burned hotel was being rebuilt by people who didn't know the real story behind the fire. And somewhere between those places, 2 broken people had found something that felt like redemption, not because they'd fixed each other, but because they'd chosen to be broken together instead of alone. That was enough. It had to be enough. Because after everything they'd survived, enough was a victory nobody could take away.